Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. This is a long-awaited podcast. I've been looking forward to doing this. We have a good crew to do it with. It's the Metaphor ReFantazio. Or what is it called, Dustin?
Retardazio.
Right, that's right. And the new Studio Zero Atlus Persona-like game from the director of Persona 3, 4, and 5, and Catherine. And today we have, a great group assembled, talk deeply about it. So much to say about it. I have so much to say about this game, especially from a thematic point of view, because I feel like it's what little I'm seeing about the game. I feel like no one's talking about what I feel like is most obvious. So I'm really excited to see what you guys have to say about it. Let's go around the horn and introduce everyone. Dustin Furman, executive producer. How are you today, my friend?
Good. I trimmed my beard this morning, or whatever facial hair I have. So I'm feeling young and invigorated, ready to talk about this game that I almost didn't hit the deadline for this. I was worried since we're doing all this prep work. I decided to ignore the prep work for our break in order to finish this game. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of crunching, but I really wanted to be here to talk about Metaphor. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Yeah, it's a game like this. You got to ignore everything in your life to get through it. It's so fucking long. Brad Ellis of Summon Sign. How are you today, my friend? Good to see you.
Good. I'm doing well. Today is one of those days where I'm like, I need to get back in the gym. It's been close to a week, but I'm feeling it. Feeling sluggish. Can't get like that. We got to get back
fat?
in it. No, not fat. Just not as strong as I want to be right now.
Look fat.
Look fat.
I look fat. Yeah.
No. Look fat like the Joe Biden thing. That's another sacred joke.
Look fat. Yeah.
Look fat.
All that stuff. But yes. Time to
imagine if Gene just straight up was like, "You look fat, Brad."
You look fat. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't get that very often.
It's funny you say that because I am like, my gut is protruding a little more than usual, and I'm like, and I do work out most days, but I'm like, I gotta do something. I don't feel like I eat that much.
But you only eat once, and you eat an insane amount of calories, I think, at once.
I do.
Right?
I eat a lot. And then, like, yesterday for dinner, I had 2 big plates of pasta with sausages. And then I had a bagel later on. And 3 pieces of garlic bread as well.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of carbs.
That's
and
a
glass
lot.
of orange juice.
Yeah, I don't know if the strat of eating 1 meal a day is even working out, doing anything, Colin. Do you think?
No, I don't know if it's working out. I kind of have just leaned into it. I mean, it's become a joke with the audience over time. Like, I've just leaned into it because I'm authentically not hungry during the day. So I might like the idea of eating when I wake up makes me want to fucking puke. It's like, ugh. I don't want to, I don't eat or drink anything for hours after I wake up, hours and hours. So I was like, yeah, let's just make it a thing. The problem is that you can never outrun your diet.
No.
And I work out really hard. I think harder than normal people that, especially do cardio. And it's like, it's not like I'm stemming it, but it's leaking in just slower. And so I got to get back in after this holiday season. I'll figure it out. I'm not going to worry too much. I'm also getting older. I'm 40.
Yeah, that's true.
My metabolism is not what it used to be. I used to eat 3 times more than I eat now. And I used to be like 140 pounds. So I'm definitely not 140 pounds anymore. Gene Park and Jack, I saw him for a little while. He was hanging out with your Washington Nationals hat on. How are you today, my friend? Good to see you.
Good. My gut is also protruding, but it's a good thing for me.
That is good.
I'm enjoying. I'm heavier than I've ever been. I'm 185 pounds, which I enjoy being.
That's a nice healthy weight for you. Your height. You're deceivingly tall, as we said.
Yeah, we're about the same height, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I didn't know that until I met you in person. I was like, oh, we're kind of the same height. And you and I were joking about it. I'm like, yeah, if you don't know an Asian person, you don't assume they're 6 feet tall. I don't know why. You just don't.
No, because look, it's a stereotype that we're shorter. There's a reason why I mention my height at 6 feet on dating profiles because I'm always getting the question, "How tall are you?"
Right? Yeah, of course.
I know why you're asking me this.
There has to be some fact behind it, though. In that, the 2 times I've been to Japan, I don't feel tall, but I no longer feel slightly shorter than everyone else.
No.
Like, there's definitely a thing, at least for Japanese people, average height, much lower.
Yeah. Yeah, but Koreans aren't Japanese people. You
Right.
know, we're typically taller. Our dicks are usually bigger. You know,
Oh, good.
Usually.
Good.
yeah, usually.
Usually.
Very, very good.
I mean, we don't fucking hide it behind pixels in our porn. That's for damn
Right.
sure.
Right.
Mhm.
That
just
is
don't have
interesting.
porn.
It's like a kind of a vanity thing. It's like you don't, it's not that it's not hot to see. It's that you don't really want to see this 2-inch penis,
No.
period.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? So we're just going to blur it out and make it a little more exciting. I understand that. That.
Yeah, but that's Japanese though, not
Right. That's not
me.
Korean. Of
Not
course.
me,
Of course.
certainly. So-
Right. Well, as we know, all Asian people are the same. So don't worry about that. Yeah. All right.
That's right. When people mix me up with the hero of Intergalactic, the heretic prophet, you know.
Right. Of course.
Mhm.
Wait, is that Gene?
That's Gene.
Putting on
My
that
God.
jacket? Yeah.
All right, guys, it's good to be here. It's good to see you guys. And we're recording this in the prelude to the holiday season. This will go live pretty soon, though, in a couple of days from when we're recording it, so people can enjoy it soon, which is exciting, so we don't have to sit on it for too long. But as I said, this is all about Metaphor ReFantazio. Studio Zero's first game, an internal Atlus team, split off by the director Katsura Hashino, who was the director of a long time. I mean, I was reading a lot about him a long time, going back to the very early Megami Tensei games or Megami Tensei games, and then kind of requested splitting off. I'm curious about that because it sounded like he was kind of talking shit about Persona 5 when he was leaving. I don't know if was intentional or if that's like lost in translation, but he was like, it's just becoming this other thing and I don't want to do it anymore, basically.
Right.
I'm like, okay, what does that say about Persona 5? That's interesting. So they've been working on this game for, I guess they worked on it for 7-ish years, and it was originally called Project ReFantazio, right? And announced back in 2016, as I recall, around or before Persona 5 originally came out, I suppose. When did Persona 5 come out even? I don't even know anymore.
2017.
2017, so yeah, before. So I played it all the way through. We all did, and we have a lot to say about it, I'm sure. I want to go around the horn and just see what everyone's feelings are about it before we begin. We can kind of pull at any thread you want. I don't care. I have an extensive list of notes, but I must say that I'm much more interested in the themes of the game than I am, and what I think the game is blatantly trying to say, than I am in the kind of story itself or the characters themselves. I wasn't that drawn into, like, I thought it was fun. The characters are great. There's some really awesome characters. I like the social links and all of that. The story is fine. I think it gets a little weaker and a little weird, but it's really more about like what's in the seams. I think that's interesting about this game, about what they're trying to say simply by using terms like more, utopia, academia, and so on and so forth, these real things. And ultimately, I think it's a game about humanism, the actual Thomas More like humanist post-Renaissance, or not post-Renaissance, but post-medieval era Renaissance idea of what it is to be human. And I'm surprised by how many people are talking about it as being so political and so message heavy, when I'm like, it's, in my opinion, really not, as much as it's about a philosophy. And so yeah, that's my kind of high-end theory. I think it's a really fun game to play. Difficult, way hard. I've played Persona 4 all the way through, except for the very end, and then it's way harder than Persona 4, so I can say that. And I've beaten Catherine, but obviously it's a different kind of game. I can't compare it to Persona 5 because I've not played it. So, Dustin, let's go to you first. You're kind of freshest on it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, your overarching 30,000-foot thoughts.
I think you're totally right about the themes of this game, and the overall nature of it is its most appealing aspect, which is kind of surprising coming from Persona 5 most recently, or Persona 4. I think those games also have great overarching themes and a shocking amount of philosophy behind them. But those games always shine for me on the individual characters and the plot twists. And with Metaphor, it's a weird kind of lopsided experience for me. I think overall it's a great game, and there are so many things going for it. I think the combat system is great and really refreshing coming from Persona. I think that the art direction is incredible, and I think that a lot of the individual characters are at least toe-to-toe with previous Atlus games as well. On that note, though, I think that the plot of this game is actually, when you think about it, at points very bad. There's shit in this game that makes no sense at all. And we can go over some of those things later, but that's, I think, probably the biggest thing dragging this game down. And I think you can make an argument like, well, it's a fantasy game. You don't need to think too hard about certain things, but I think that's bullshit. So I really think that the plot, especially like you said in the latter half, really falls off. There's no consequences in this story. Death means nothing at a certain point. I have a lot of complaints in that department, but overall, with all of that, I still think it's a fantastic game. I think the combat, as I said earlier, I actually feel like I didn't go into the archetype system enough in it, because it wasn't towards the end that I was like really starting to get into the nitty gritty of it. So yeah, the philosophical elements are so cool. I remember seeing a video from Max Darrett, if any of you guys know him, on YouTube, talking about Persona, and he also has one up for Metaphor too. But it's really interesting how the main combat system, right, in this game is about archetypes. And so Persona 4 is a game about fighting your shadow self, which is like very Carl Jung, the shadow self, able to take the shadow self and overcome it to become a better version of yourself. Whereas this game, also Carl Jung, taking the archetype mentality and fusing that with yourself in order to be the ultimate version. Very interesting, very deep, much deeper than you'd think for a little fantasy game.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Jung, because I bring him up sometimes actually in my therapy, because that I go and do in my real life, because he believes that I am really haunted by dreams. I have fucked up dreams. I've said this many times, every night. Angst-ridden, anxiety-ridden dreams. And his whole thing was that, unlike Freud and others that thought that you can interpret dreams through subject matter, Jung said that dreams are totally tied to the individual and cannot be interpreted. That like a dream, what happens to you in a dream is what happens to you in a dream, and it means something for you, and you can't do anything more than that, which is, so it's just interesting to hear you bring him up. All right, let's go to Brad. What are your 30,000 foot thoughts here on Metaphor ReFantazio?
Yeah, overall, like, a lot of the plot stuff is funny, you guys talking about, because I do agree some of it's kind of weird. It's been like a month since I've played the game, though, so I am looking forward to getting more of like a more recent take from you guys. But I gotta say, what really stuck out for me in this game is I loved the combat. I thought the archetype system was so much fun. I had so much fun experimenting and switching guys off onto new archetypes. I love that kind of stuff in RPGs, getting experiment, taking abilities over and all that stuff. I thought all the archetypes were really fun too. Like the trickster one that could debuff everyone was really fun to mess around with. I had a good time with that. And I really liked the cast a lot in this game. I think they were great. I was really happy that Stroll right away wasn't the Junpei or the Yusuke or the Ryuji character right off. Like, your best buddy's your bud, but he's not a complete dumbass right at the beginning of the game. So I was very happy about that. It wasn't,
he's not aggressively horny.
Yeah, it wasn't the same stereotype as your first party member character. So I was really happy about that. I liked Hulkenberg, of course. She was great. Heismay, though, the best, my favorite character of the year. So awesome. What an impactful journey with him and his whole story. I loved all that kind of stuff. And I thought the art direction was super strong, particularly a lot of the bosses. They looked incredible. They stood out and they were super unique to me. A lot of my gripes with the game are, I think it looks really old, and it shouldn't look this old, in my opinion. It should be a little higher budget in that sense. And a lot of the environments are very small, which kind of bummed me out too. They felt very PS2, very PS3 in their scope. They looked great though, don't get me wrong. And just some of the dungeon design I thought was lackluster. Could have gone a little further than that. So those are my main complaints with the game. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I had a hell of a good time playing it. I was thinking about it a lot, and it was definitely one of my favorites of the year.
Gene, I think you were done with it first. Did you beat it even before it came out?
I did not play it or beat it before it came out.
Oh, okay.
I basically played it at launch.
Okay, cool. So what are your thoughts?
But I do think that I did beat it first, though. So it's been a minute since I experienced it. But yeah, it's my game of the year. I loved it. What's funny is that it's been so long since I played Metaphor that I actually beat Persona 5 within that time in the past month. So I actually have the perspective, and that's because I love Metaphor so much that I felt like I needed to go back to Persona 5 to really, really see what I quote unquote missed. And turns out I missed a lot. Turns out that I don't know if I like Persona 5 or Metaphor better. I think Metaphor does a lot better. I think the cast overall is better, and that's not to say that the Persona 5 cast is weak. I just think that the Metaphor cast is just stronger overall. There's just no weak link among them. The plot itself, while I don't really agree quite harshly with Dustin, because I do think that you can shoo away a lot of it as fantasy, and you can do that a lot with Persona 2. Honestly, there's a lot of silly stuff in Persona that you can just be like, well, that's just the metaverse, or that's just like the dimensions or whatever like that, but I do agree that overall the moment to moment plot beats were exciting, in particular, like some of the middle portions, and we can get into more details, but they weren't quite as strong or quite as thought out or planned out as what I saw in Persona. But that said, I totally agree with Brad that I think the systems were so much better. I loved messing with the archetype system. I love the fact that your hero can just be another class with another archetype, and then they wield a completely different weapon. And that weapon, when you wield it, will have different effects in like the regular Dynasty Warriors type of action, the combat that you do when you're over leveled in a dungeon. I just think that was always so unique and so much fun. I never got tired of just doing the regular combat within these dungeons. I do think that the dungeons are much weaker than in Persona, than Persona 5 in general. But they are better than Persona 4. So there's that.
Yeah.
And they're better than Persona 3, although I haven't touched Reload, so that's not what I'm counting. But overall, I do wish that they did a little bit more dungeons, a little bit. They were a little bit more imaginative with the dungeons. I don't think you really get anything interesting until maybe the middle of the game, and even then, that's a retread of an older game. And then maybe towards the end of the game, where, well, actually, not even the end of the game, because some of the secret dungeons were really boring.
Yeah,
like the towers. That was just the same tower that we played earlier in the game. It's just a different palette color, and then there's a different dragon at the end. So that got kind of lame. And I definitely felt like towards the end, I was like, okay, I'm ready to wrap this up. And sure enough, the game did wrap up. But
the last dungeon wasn't. I was comparing and contrasting it to Dragon Quest XI and how I remember beating that game. And I started up like the night before at like 10 at the final dungeon. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to get into this. And like really, and I was done at 6 a.m. And I was like, this game doesn't you guys look at my trophies. It doesn't fucking end.
Yeah.
And what I liked about this game was it actually does end quick. And did anyone else get Mega Man vibes from the end of the game? I did. It felt like a mix of Mega Man and Final Fantasy IV in some sense, in that you're like, there's like a gauntlet of bosses, and they're all the bosses. And I thought that was cool. Actually.
Yeah. The final dungeon, by the time I got there, I was like, come on, man. How many times is this game going to fucking end? Just let me fight Luis already. Yeah. Holy shit.
The amount of times a character says, this is the final battle, is hilarious. Because they start saying the final battle probably 10 hours before the game ends. When you're first going to fight Luis in Grand Trad, like in public in front of everybody, they're like, this is the final battle.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just does that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like it's 20 hours in the game where I'm like, oh, there's going to be a lot more. The game's just tricking me. It's like, no, I was like 50 hours in at this point or something like that. So I was like, okay, I'm actually getting towards the end. And it just kept going and going and going and going.
I do like your comparison to Dragon Quest XI, and I'm interested to hear more about that, because this game did remind me a lot of Dragon Quest XI. It felt like it looked at Dragon Quest XI, and they were like, how can we do this a little differently than what Dragon Quest XI did? How can we?
Yeah, it's not as long. It definitely,
how can we quote unquote subvert? It's not as long as Dragon Quest XI. Dragon Quest XI really is a mega epic, right?
It's crazy that it's like 50 hours shorter probably than Dragon Quest XI.
It is. Like, Dragon Quest XI is like 120 hours long, and I beat Metaphor but in 80 hours. So yeah, it's about like 40 hours shorter for me.
I couldn't believe how long that game was. And you know me, I'm crazy about my clock. I've literally restarted games because I thought the clock was off. So. Because I like knowing, I like knowing. I think it's an important component of these sorts of games.
I did feel like the soundtrack to Metaphor was evocative of Dragon Quest a little bit, which is why the music wasn't as interesting, or like, of course, obviously as jazzy as Persona, and not as memorable. But I feel like they were trying to mimic what Dragon Quest did, and kind of, give it its own spin.
I was gonna say like I mean, I'm a huge Dragon Quest fan, but obviously I think everyone knows that. But it's like, show me Dragon Quest 12 already. Like, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? You know, it's so annoying. It's been years.
I know.
And they're like, it's gonna be like an adult Dragon Quest game, and I'm like, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
I don't know if I even want that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like the comfort food. As I play Dragon Quest 3 HD, 2D HD, whatever the fuck it is, I'm reminded. I'm like, I don't want to play this all the time, but this is straight up traditional comfort food. There's nothing more or less than exactly what you see. You know, the story is irrelevant. Doesn't matter. No one knows what the fuck's going on anyway. And you're just kind of grinding and playing. All right, guys, tell me a little bit, because you guys, all three of you are much more tuned into Persona than I am. And I would say Atlus generally. My connection with Atlus is mostly through Vanillaware, I would say at this point. And a few, like, I was a huge Catherine stan and all of that, but you guys know this stuff a lot better than me. What do you read about this spin-off of Studio Zero from P Studio? I was reading, like, they really did take a lot of important people from that team. What do you think that's all about? And where does that leave Persona? And do you see the through line from Persona 4 and 5, I guess, in this game? There's a lot that I don't know because I just haven't played them. So I'm kind of curious about the behind the scenes stuff, if any of you guys have anything to say about it.
I would say, I mean, this is just speculation on my part. I haven't read any interviews or tried to investigate this, but Persona, of course, started as a Shin Megami Tensei spin-off series. It was Shin Megami Tensei Persona Revelations, right? And
PS1 game.
Yeah, PS1. And pretty early on, it became, it has like its core features, or its like core things that make it a Persona game, right? It has I guess maybe not the early ones, but really starting in Persona 3, I feel like the main tenets were there. It takes place with high school students, where you, throughout the game, gather a large cast of other playable characters. You have a clock system that involves both when you're in the dungeon and how you spend your time outside of the dungeon. So I would imagine, again, speculation, that the creator was like, okay, I've done 3 of these games that all have the core tenets, maybe more. I don't know if he directed all of them, but at least 3. And we've established what a Persona game is and have done it and basically perfected it. I don't want to do this anymore because I'm just doing the same. The story is different in each one, of course, like very different, but you have to work within the confines of what a Persona game is.
Right. But isn't this just a Persona game too? I mean, it's so recognizably Persona that it's insane, in my opinion. Like,
I would say in terms of many of its mechanics, it is, but even then the combat system is, the core of the combat system, I would say, is totally different, with the archetype system being totally different than Personas, where Personas are almost like a Pokemon game where you're catching, whatever. And then this one having more of a job system where any character can do anything.
Yeah, it's like Final Fantasy 3 and Final Fantasy 5 in that sense.
The pacing is different too, because obviously we have the calendar system here in Metaphor, but in Persona you're locked into going to fucking high school. You have to do the days in school.
That's interesting.
And then nighttime in this one, and then it's always like you have your regular days where you can fuck around and do all your social links, and then you have to do the dungeon by the end of the deadline. Whereas Metaphor, like, they'll start off doing that, but then the structure completely changes throughout the game, where it's like, okay, well, why don't you just do the dungeon first and then fuck around afterwards? Or, maybe there is no deadline or whatever. I mean, there's always a deadline, but like the way they did it, it was way different here in Metaphor.
Yeah.
Persona.
Yeah, I believe that because I just don't have the familiarity you guys do. Where
you play Persona 4, yeah. So
yeah, and you would see through the creases a lot more than I would too, as far as what trends and what doesn't. From it just, to me, from a more casual perspective, I was like, this is extremely Persona. I don't mind that. I don't mind a developer being like, this is our pocket and we can do really cool things in this pocket. I think that's totally fine. I was just surprised when I was reading about how over Persona he was, this Katsura Hashino guy, and then being like, but nonetheless, we're making a Persona game. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I just think a lot of that has to do with maybe the setting and the themes of those games. I think just it taking place in a new world that they could create from scratch and having to be like stuck in our world probably went a long way for them. And I wouldn't be surprised for how long this game took if it started out more different in what they were going with, and it just kind of maybe formed into this over time, more Persona-esque.
Presumably, just because of the time.
For how long it took, I think it changed quite a bit probably from what it was. But yeah, just a fresh setting, I think can go a long way for these guys.
The cast is no longer just high school kids. You know, Haizumi has a kid. You know, Nuris is an old man, tall. You know, there's different. The cast itself reflects different stages of life and life experience versus we're just all high school kids and we all have the same set of problems and anxieties. Versus our anxieties could be whatever in metaphor.
You interviewed Hashino, right?
I did.
Yeah. So you have a little bit of great insight into that too. That's interesting. One of the things that I was fascinated by I think you guys can all relate. Like there are games where I really care deeply about spoilers and I don't want to know any. So like, I don't know if you guys saw that Intergalactic, apparently like the whole story is already leaked. I don't know if it's actually true or not though. And like there are games where I'd be like, oh, I'll just read it. I don't care. And that's not one of those games. Like I did that with Wolverine, for instance, where I was like, oh, I just spoiled. I don't even, and what's so funny is I don't remember anything because I don't know anything about Marvel. So I have no idea what I spoiled. I just read the whole thing. This is one of those games where I was like, no, this is obviously highly story driven. It would be like Final Fantasy VII Remake or something where I'm like, no, I don't want to spoil it for myself. I want to know. So to avoid that, and because it took me 2 months to beat it almost, I didn't read anything. I was just trying to avoid everything. The only stuff I really saw, as I saw people saying to me, was like, oh, it's so political. I can't wait to see what you think of the political themes. And I walked away being like, I don't think it's very political at all, but maybe like literally political. But I try to avoid all the story stuff. And what I was surprised about were some of the things that the team was saying, specifically, like, we're not trying to, we don't have a message. Like there's no message in like political message in the game. I was like, that's interesting. You guys, and that's not PR talk. I think that's authentic. I think that they were afraid of the timing of when it was made and when it was coming out, and that people were going to attach it to certain things. And they were like, we don't want to be attached to that. It's not what it is. Of course, media consumption means you can attach it to anything you want. But it was interesting to see them say that. And so I think the game, that drew me a lot deeper into the game and the characters, and allowed me to see beyond the Persona wallpaper, if you want to call it that, on it. And it made me more interested in playing Persona because, again, these calendar-driven games, we were talking about it on Summon Sign, these calendar-driven games are just not for me typically, because it's not why I get into games. It's not, I don't want a game to say like, I'm going to hold a gun to your head, you're going to play it for like 70 hours and you're definitely going to miss shit. Because the one thing I'll tell you about this game, never playing it again. Like that's a guarantee. Like I'm never going back to this game. It's not an insult to it. It just requires too much and I don't love it that much. So I want to go into these kinds of games with a game plan to be like, this is the one time only hit. What am I going to see it all or not? But I think with Trails a little bit, which I liked Trails of Cold Steel. And then these kinds of games, it's like, no, I'll make an exception like once a year, print out my little walkthrough, of days and just play it through entirely. But there is something really compelling about raw dogging it. But I would be so regretful if I did that from my own OCD, deeply autistic point of view, where I'm like, I just need to see it all. So that was the one difficult thing I think I grappled with the game, was just, and there is a lot of time at the end, especially if you're doing it mega efficient, which I did. I did everything and I had weeks.
You must have had weeks of just going to bed.
I did. I just went to bed over and over again.
Just sleeping.
It was like it was actually hilariously anticlimactic because, the tension's building and then the game, it's at the end of the game and everyone knows, like everyone around you knows it's about, the culmination's about to happen. And so it's like you wake up and Gallica's like, better take care of business today. Like there's only 8 days left and it's like, all right, go back to bed. and you like do this over and over again until you're like on the last day. So it was a little bit anticlimactic, but I'm glad I did that because I would have been worried. I did every side quest. I saw every location. I maxed out every social link. I did all of the optional stuff. What did you guys think? I didn't even consider this actually. You guys are bigger fans of this style game. So I feel like you must have, is that no romance? Was that surprising? And what kind of horrible pornography is out there of Gallica and Will?
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
Just use the whole fairy, right?
Like the fair. I picture her wrapped around the dick, like the
whole thing. No.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, go ahead, Dustin.
Okay, so no romance. In some ways, it's. I wish it had it, and I'm also glad it doesn't at the same time. Just because I feel like there are certain characters in this game are a natural fit for a romance. For example, I feel like in some ways the game is kind of leaning that Yufa is what would be the romance.
Mm-hmm. Yufa's a romance. I lean totally into it. You practically have sex with her.
Right. Yeah, with your hands.
With your hands. Yeah.
Later on.
She gives you a hand job, yeah.
And Yufa's bae, by the way. She is best girl. I was texting Gina about it, and I was like, dude, I think I've got a third eye kink now.
A third eye fetish.
Dude,
I was so disturbed by that. Like, I was like, put the helmet back on.
It like kind of it bothered me a little the entire time.
I was like, fucking put a bag over that shit. Put a bag
Jesus. Jesus, it's so fucked.
It's just staring at you, man, and it's like half open too. It's just
I love it.
Sexy, dude. I like it.
What I wanted to see was someone with glasses in that society where they had like glasses that were also
right
like three lens glasses.
Awesome. That would be even hotter. Glasses do it for me. Yeah, that would be even hotter. He has a whole like big old forehead monocle. You know?
Yeah, that would be sick.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just I kind of wish there was romance in it because I feel like it makes more sense in some ways in this game than a Persona game, and you can also romance someone without feeling like a fucking creep. So, but I think for the overall themes and what this game's going for, I feel like it would be a distraction from the main story. So I'm okay with it. But
so for context for Colin, since he didn't play Persona 5, in Persona 5 you can pursue multiple relationships with adults in Persona 5.
Micah told me this, that you can romance a teacher or something like that.
A teacher who is
it's
also
like don't stand so close to me by the police.
Who literally moonlights as a sex worker, and then you are calling her sex worker line to come over. So not to have sex with you, but just so she'll be all sexy and stuff.
Jeez.
And then there is like the doctor who's just feeding you drugs, who's totally hot.
She's hot.
And then there's a fortune teller, and then there's like a shogi person, and they're all adults. And I half expect Skeeter Jean or one of the Dads Against Predators to come in and be like, "What the fuck you doing here, man? What the fuck who are you here to meet, huh? Who are you here to meet?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm here to meet Joker, the protagonist of Persona."
Dude, that's so funny. Like
it's weird. I
don't want to get too deep in it. I don't know Japanese culture that well, but is part of it that they have a lower age of? It's like 13 there, isn't it, in Japan? Like your age of consent.
I don't know.
Dustin,
and I'm pretty sure there was no age of. Yeah, Dustin definitely knows. I'm pretty sure there was no age of. So Dustin, you might know this too. I'm pretty sure the age of consent in Japan is even new. Like that there even is one.
Okay.
Is like within the last 15 years or 10 years or something. So is that, I'm not even trying to be sarcastic. In other words, is it like, the 16, 17, year old high school student and the sexy doctor, like that's not as much of a faux pas in the society as it is.
No,
probably as it would be in the United States.
For a lot of young boys there, I imagine, or high school kids, they're probably all about that shit.
Yeah.
Kidding me?
Yeah. I mean, you look at the comments on any like Twitter posts about, this 22-year-old female teacher had sex with, there was a recent one where it's, this 22-year-old teacher had sex with a 16-year-old. And you see a bunch of guys be like, you shouldn't have punished her or whatever.
Yeah, it's
just Persona in real life.
Guys, man.
So as far as the age of consent in Japan, it is 16.
Oh, 16. Okay.
Apparently this was raised last year.
Oh, okay.
Last year.
Where it was 13.
Right.
So, and they redefined the definition of rape.
To be actually rape now.
I don't know. It's just what the headline says from NPR. Japan expands the definition of rape and raises the age of consent to 16 from 13.
Yeah, probably it's there's a I read about, or maybe I even saw a video about it because I watch all these weird Japanese videos about like, what's that term, like hikukomori or whatever, and like all these different things, like the people that don't leave their houses. So like you just find your way down this rabbit hole, and there's like probably just different mores in that society that need to be purged out or if that they want to purge out as it becomes more and more, we become more and more interconnected and globalized. I think like things like that stand out. Just like gun ownership in the United States stands out.
Sure.
As an example, people are like, what? Like,
Yeah.
It's like unthinkable. So yeah, it's I don't want to be too judgmental on them, although it is weird. And yeah, I'm disappointed when I see it's like, oh, this 16-year-old boy was had sex with his 24-year-old teacher. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you doing? It doesn't matter like what the genders are. Yeah. Is it worse in the other direction? It feels worse in the other direction, but it's really bad in both directions. Mm-hmm. That's the point. Yeah,
don't fuck your kids, man. Come on.
Yeah, please. That with all like, there's all these options for you. That's what I'm so confused about. That you would bring up Skeeter Jean and like these other guys you and I like love, right? Mm-hmm. That we watch. I'm a Gordon Flowers man myself, and that's the thing that always strikes me is like you're doing this and you have a problem because you really have to choose and want to do this. Like mm-hmm. you really have to want it. It's fucking crazy.
Colin, by the way,
yeah.
Chris Hansen is still in operation, right?
I saw that. Yeah, he does like really. He's. It's what I don't like about Skeeter. I like Skeeter Jean, but it's like it's a little too good.
Yeah,
I like the more like renegade. This guy might get literally shot any moment, kind of shit. Yeah.
So Chris Hansen has his whole network, True Blue, and you can watch a lot of free episodes on True Blue. And then I guess they're not doing that well because they've been releasing a lot more free episodes. So I was like, wait, they have all these episodes behind the paywall. So I looked into it. It's just $5 a month. Chris Hansen has 11 seasons of content.
Oh my God!
Wow. I think
maybe I got to get in on that.
I think you should consider throwing $5 at Hansen.
Gladly.
To just gorge on 11 seasons of new Chris Hansen content.
Yeah. Oh my God!
I've been living it ever since, man. It's great.
Take a seat. As you guys know, Chris Hansen unfortunately made an appearance at our wedding because on the the placard where you come in and it tells you where to sit, like the seating chart.
Oh,
and
right. Yeah.
And we had a picture of him on there and it said, "Take a seat." Oh, and then there was all the table like. So
I didn't even notice that. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think we might even have it still. I'm sure that was weird to a lot of different people. It is weird. I mean, it's deeply weird. All right, we got a little bit off of the topic there. That's okay though. That's sacred symbols. I wonder, should we talk about the game, like the characters and all that first, or should we talk about the overarching themes and then get deeper into the game? Like I have no real preference. Like I'm really eager to talk about the philosophy behind the game, but I don't know that's even really what's most useful to people.
I think a lot of people are really interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I want to know.
Hearing all three of us yap about fucking metaphor for
me and Gene have talked about this game
so.
Forever.
Yeah, so you should probably unload because I, as a listener, I'm interested to hear what you have to say too.
Please unload on us. I'm
gonna unload on you now.
Oh, thank you.
All over our third eye.
Yeah. All over I just feel like, and I don't know if it's like a feint in some sense to make it feel like, oh, you're grasping the game, but you really don't by being so overt in some sense. But I just feel like Utopia and the book and the character more, really say everything about what the game is about. I think. I mean, I don't know how else you really can interpret the obvious inclusion of like Platonic, like Plato, academia, and like having a character named Moore and a book named Utopia. Like these are just things that are blatant. And for people that don't know, Utopia was a book Thomas More published. Thomas More is probably most famous for, he's like a polemicist, but he's like most famous probably for being the Lord Chancellor for Henry VIII and then got executed by Henry VIII because he refused to accede to his demands with the schism between the Catholic Church and what would become the Church of England. But he publishes Utopia in 1516. He dies like in 1535. So this is like, 20 years before he dies. And it's basically like a conversation between a fictional version of him and some other real people. I think Plato's actually in the first part of the book and so on and so forth. But ultimately, it's a conversation with him and a character named Raphael Hythloday. And this is a pretty important political text in some sense. We went into it when I was in college. I obviously studied American history, and we talked and studied it quite a bit, although I never read it all the way through. It was written in Latin. I don't think it was even translated into English until the 1600s, like the late 1600s. But it was it's like a touchstone because I don't know. Are you guys familiar with Utopia at all, or like what it's about, or Thomas More, or anything like that? Basically, it's like it's what, depending on how you interpret it, it's the kind of like Marx and Engels really loved Utopia. But also, so like communists love Utopia, but also like humanists love Utopia. Conservatives, or like what you might call like classical liberals, I guess, also love Utopia. And they love it for similar reasons, but it's all about how you interpret it. Because he made up the word utopia. And utopia literally translates, and I think this is really important to what the game is about. It translates to no place, as in like it's not possible. And you can read a ton of theories about what the book's about. I mean, the way Marx interprets it and the way others interpret it, for instance, are going to be radically different. But it's even suggested that More included himself in the book as himself because More translates to Morris in Latin, which means fool. And he's basically being, and they're basically going into, and the Raphael Hathlade character, Hathlade translates into Latin to bearer of nonsense. And what it seems like is like saying, this is Utopia is exactly what you guys think it is in the kind of the nomenclature. It's like this perfect place. And in the book, it's an island nation. And it's this really fucking crazy place where incredibly liberal shit happens and incredibly conservative shit happens. For instance, like no one has permanent jobs and there's no private property. Obviously, you can see why Marx was really into it, but they have slaves and you're not allowed to leave and shit like that. Like all sorts of weird, it's like a really weird place. And I think like the entire conversation around More and Utopia and the book that becomes the novel that mimics More's Utopia, and is read throughout is showing how this is actually unobtainable and that like it's a fool's errand to assume that anything can be truly perfect. And in all these hundreds of years later, people interpret More and Utopia in that lens, the Marxist kind of lens of he's really talking about how it's possible to have a society where people exchange jobs, no private property, free healthcare, like euthanasia, like all sorts of weird things. And then people interpret it saying like, no, he's making fun of it. He's saying like, it's not possible. Just read the Latin words and the names of everyone. And you realize that if you interpret it seriously, you're misinterpreting it. And I think that is the core of the game, is that they're trying to strive for a better world, but it's it's pretty much unattainable. And the idea of perfection is a farce. And that's kind of what I took out of it. I don't know if that's like me literally being the only person in the world that interpreted it like that. But that, and, you know, Socrates begets Plato, begets Aristotle. Plato and the setting of academia, I think, is important too. I'm not a philosophy, especially ancient philosophy person at all, but I'm pretty sure Plato's core philosophy was about like what was real and what wasn't, right? Like about things that you can interpret in reality and things that are ethereal. And there's a whole school of thought around that. And I think that also plays a part and reinforces the entire notion of what I think the game's about, which is like what is real and what is fake, what is obtainable and what is unobtainable. So I feel like they tell you a lot just by using those words. And the fact that it's not just words, but that they're literally reading from a version of Utopia. And that the enemies in the game are humans is, I don't know. I don't know if you guys agree, but that's kind of how I see it.
I totally agree because I think the conflict of the interpretation of the real world Utopia is represented in the game between Luis and Will. You know, they both read the same book, Utopia, and they both came away with different goals.
Right.
You know,
right.
So I do believe that what your read of it is pretty much reflected in the game. from what I so like in that sense, I think it's very political, because if Marx would play metaphor and he'll come away with, you can totally do this or whatever, In my review, I actually cite a book by a liberal writer by Yasha Monk, The Great Experiment: Why Diverse Democracies Fall Apart and How They Can Endure. And it's all a history about how democracies who are trying to have diverse ethnic groups or whatever like that and represent different perspectives usually end up falling apart. They tend to have struggles and fights, and that's why Stroll in the game, I'm sending from my review here, but that's why Stroll in the game says, I don't imagine how well any of this will turn out in the real world. In public opinion, tribal perspective always divides us. All of our different perspectives, those differences are always going to be there. So that's why even Fidelio in the game, he says, if everybody's free to do what they want, they'll work out their own reasons to be prejudiced. So I do feel like that the game is kind of like, at least like maybe not giving an answer, but at least detailing why Utopia is possibly a fool's dream or impossible. And the game also does depict Armor in the game as somewhat foolish too.
I even feel like the inclusion of the Vitruvian Man just reinforces this, because it's another deep, in this case Da Vinci, like a deep humanist perspective. It's all, I think you're right. It's all tied together in this major way. I love what you said about them interpreting the book differently, and that in and of itself, and how the book is in itself dangerous. Mm-hmm. I mean, Henry VIII apparently was like really fascinated by the book, and people were kind of put off by it because, and why I think it's so funny when people interpret it as, it's like, this is a liberal game. It's like, I don't think it's a partisan game at all. But Thomas More was a deeply conservative, crazy conservative person, literally executed because he wouldn't say that the king was above God. And you even see that in Utopia. Like, if you commit adultery in Utopia in the book, they kill you. If you I have it here written here. I want to make sure I have this right. Yeah, if you have premarital sex, they make you into a slave. Like, but they also have like freedom of religion. It's like, okay. And the one thing that I think is important maybe is the people who don't believe in Utopia, atheists, are allowed to exist, but they're not well liked, and people are constantly trying to change their mind. And that almost might be like the player in the game, the atheist. What direction is right? Like the meritocratic, violent perspective of Luis, or like the deeply human perspective of, Will, or whatever you named your character. Dustin, do you have anything to say about this? I don't know. I wonder how you interpreted these different themes.
I'm trying to think about how to connect the dots between what you're saying and what's in my mind, because I think that while it's very clear that that's the drawn inspiration, I think that there probably is some modifications where the Utopia novel in metaphor is very different from the real Utopia novel. And I think that some of the conclusions that can be drawn about the premise of the game, at least for me, is different, in that the very beginning of the game says, like, it asks you the question, like, I'm trying to remember if it's like, is fantasy useful, or like, can it become reality or something? And that's one of the big takeaways for me, is this idea that, like, in, I guess, thinking about their world, and they look at what is a reflection of our world, and it's like, that's totally not possible. How could any of that be possible? And you think about the actual Utopia book, and obviously there's some bad things in it, but some of the positive things are like freedom of religion, equal rights for a woman can do a man's job and it's no problem, right? Like, at that time, radical ideas that appeared as fantasy and weren't even worth entertaining as anything but such. So there's this idea, it's like, even though something is too good to be true, things can change and adapt, and fantasy can become reality. So, and you see that kind of at the end of the game, where there's like the year time gap where it's like, yeah, everything's still pretty fucked up here, but we're working towards this idea that maybe we'll never reach utopia, but the fantasy, the dream of a better reality is possible. Even though it is a fantasy, we can make fantasy a reality just through time. So anyway, that's just kind of my vomit of thoughts that's somewhat loosely connected. But
Brad, do you have anything you want to add?
I guess just it is interesting getting these two different perspectives of what Utopia should be. But I feel like the game clearly leads you in one direction, which is Will's perspective of Utopia. I think it would have been interesting if they gave you like some choices you could have made, I suppose, but that's not really in the game. Everything's pretty linear from a narrative standpoint. So the game does kind of push you in this idea of everyone get along and treat each other with respect thing, but I do think it's interesting, and I wish they kind of explored that more with player choice, but it might have been too messy, and maybe some people would have got upset by the things you could do in the game. I don't know.
Yeah, I like what you say there. Yeah, because it does seem. I mean, they're obviously not only is there obviously a villain and a hero, but I think that there's a villainous perspective and a heroic perspective. Because like the social Darwinism or whatever that Louis ultimately supports is not. It's like that's a primitive human perspective,
right?
So that's not the answer. Like I always think about this, and actually this Gene's here, and this is like an interesting thing is like we go, Gene was sick recently and had cancer, and it's like we go out of our way to save and protect those people, and that is the true height, in my opinion, of being human. Is like, yeah, it's not dog eat dog. It doesn't have to be. It's actually my perspective on why, though I don't think you have a right to healthcare, because I don't think you have a right to other people's services. I think we have a societal, modern need to provide healthcare for people because we're not in caves anymore.
Right.
And so the way we think about things changes. And so there is a lot of that in the game. It's like the final, it's not a fine line. It's like but the obviousness of like why the Nazis thought that they were right. They were crazy, but they definitely thought they were right. And you have like fanatics like that follow these paths that I think are deeply inhuman. So, what do you guys think about anxiety as kind of the central pillar of the story? How do you interpret that?
Yeah, I spoke to Hashino about this, and he is about how it represents how we apply our fears and anxiety onto people. So like, Trump is probably the number one obvious thing where it's like, oh my God, I have this fear of let me lean all the way alt right. I have this fear of like immigration. I have this feel of like the great white disappearance or whatever, right? If I was a white person. So as a white person, if I'm fearing that there are going to be less people of me around the world, and Trump is like saying things like, oh yeah, well, we should protect, our borders and everything like that, then I would be like, okay, well, let me project my fear and anxiety onto what Trump is saying right here, So he's like, because Persona is about how Persona is about the self, right? It's about building up the self and how we relate to others. And Metaphor is about how the self can widen to the broader populace, how the self can contradict to what the broader populace would want, and how when we push anxieties onto other people, that choice will affect other people. Like my vote for Trump will affect the entire world, basically. That's what it's meaning. So that's why he says, in my interview, he says if the striking of that balance is off, because we do have to apply some of our hopes and changes and fears onto other people, onto politicians. Like, that's exactly what fucking Barack Obama was about, about hope and hope he changes stuff, as Sarah Palin said, But if the striking of that balance is off, things could get out of control. We wanted to see how that balance between taking things on yourself and relying on others to face fear and anxiety could affect the story. So that's basically the impetus of what Metaphor is about, and why anxiety is a kind of personified as power,
Yeah, that's interesting.
And power given to somebody,
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I would say too, what I think one of the big dynamics about this idea of anxiety in the game is that it's kind of shows that we as Gene was saying, we put our anxieties on leaders or organizations. And I think that's kind of what it's showing, is that it's like being the bearer of a population's anxiety also comes with a great amount of power over these people. And so you see the Sanctus Church. It's like, no, we're the answer. We should be in charge. We'll take your anxiety, but you must submit to us. Then, of course, there's like the political angle side as well with the different people that are running. And that with the Luis's side, it's like, no, this idea of individuals putting their anxiety into something other than themselves is the problem. And so people need to, if you can't take on and endure with your own anxiety, then you don't deserve to be around.
You're weak.
You're weak and you're
weak.
out.
Yeah.
And the protagonist's goal is like, is kind of like what he was saying in that interview. It's like, we can have a balance of these things. The problem is when the anxiety is put into one thing too much, whether it's yourself, whether it's a politician, whether it's the church or whatever. And different people have different needs as well. Whereas one person's like, I don't need religion as a way to balance my life. But I really care about who's in office. And so that's where I'm channeling all of this. And so, yeah, the idea of the main character, it's like, no, we can, there's not one particular way to live your life because everyone's different. So that's what I made of it. And I think that coming from a Persona game, as Gene was saying, is like all about the self, this idea of like, the magla in the air, I actually think is one of the coolest elements, how it is anxiety.
Anything you want to add, Brad, on this anxiety topic, and then I'll kick it to you for something else.
I think it's just like something, not in like the broader scope, it's just something you see with characters deal with throughout the game. Like all the followers, all your party members, like Stroll with this anxiety, of wanting to be a lord and do his family right. And it's kind of these characters overcoming their fears. It's very Persona in that sense to me as well, facing your true self and everything. So I do think it's pretty standard Persona fare in that sense, but like you guys are saying, it broadens itself by going out through this political, or these like candidates everyone's putting their faith into. So I thought that was the more interesting part of everyone's fears and anxieties in the game, like you guys are saying.
Yeah, it's interesting too, in just that the whole structure, I keep seeing the game referred to as like this like medieval style fantasy game, but I'm like, it feels so much more modern in some sense than that. It doesn't seem like it's a really great description of what it actually is. It feels more like Final Fantasy VI, like, and that's like, we have swords and dragons, and then we have like fucking steam engines and things like that.
And Will's a Burberry ass outfit.
Yeah. Yes.
I love it. But yeah, it's very Burberry.
What do we think of let's dive more into the calendar system, I guess, is that because that's how we play the game. I had this one I was stuck on this, which really annoyed me, and I brought this up on Sacred Symbols, which is they use fake day of the week names but real month names. And I was like, what? But why? Like, why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. And then at the end of the game, they're on like the 35th day of a month, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was what that was all about. Actually, I forgot to, I'm looking at my notes now. I forgot to ask you guys this. It might make most sense to ask this before we even get any further, is like, and I didn't know any of this because I wouldn't know this because I'm not into the Shin Megami Tensei stuff, but like, what are the thoughts of the theory that this is a Megami Tensei game? I was reading that like there's not only obviously lots of items and names and monsters and shit like that in the game from those, apparently. Also the combat system apparently is from Shin Megami Tensei, but the idea of what do they call a press turn battle system battle, with like the turn diamonds or whatever, the little jewels, which is cool.
I love doing that.
Yeah, me too. I really liked it a lot. Once I really understood it, I was like, this is really actually quite cool.
Very cool.
Do you believe that hype that this is actually a game that connects directly to that franchise?
To an extent, because Yufa has summons that are SMT demons and stuff like that, like Jack Frost, are all SMT things. So I think so. To me, it's just kind of like, it feels like a Final Fantasy spinoff kind of thing where it's like, here are elements from this, but it's kind of in the background. I wouldn't be surprised, Colin, if they're like, hey, that civilization from the past that we talk about through the game, hey, that's our universe where that is the Persona or the SMT timeline. So they could easily do something like that.
Are you guys missing the Etrian Odyssey connection here?
Oh yeah, I don't know. Etrian Odyssey is like a dungeon crawler, isn't it? I would never even know anything about that.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to pretend that I caught it right away too, because I certainly didn't play Etrian Odyssey on the 3DS. I learned this afterwards. But the Dragon Temple underneath Virga Island, I think it was called. That whole like modern city or whatever. That's the exact same map from Etrian Odyssey.
Oh, okay.
The exact same map.
That's cool.
Exact same layout. That's why it was all like 90 degrees angles and everything like that, because it was reflecting the first person dungeon crawler aspect of it. That's why that dungeon was a little frustrating and a little hard to get through. But also, after you beat the whole Virga Island chapter, Yufa's brother, that really handsome looking dude with the third eye, he was like, "Yes, we don't name things, but we did call our dragon Et, so maybe I should call our land Etria." So
interesting. Yeah, wouldn't even made that connection.
Yeah. Trust me, I didn't catch it at first either. Cool. So I'm not going to pretend that I was like, "Oh, Etrian Odyssey." Yeah, I didn't catch it, but I'm just saying that it's in the game. So,
there's also the relics that are brought are from Persona, like the Holy Grail is from Persona 5, which the description also gets into. That sounds like it is that. There's also the piggy from Persona 5, like the piggy bank guy, the boss that you fight in, I think, the bank heist, but I don't remember. I don't know if that means that these are connected worlds. It reads more to me that this is just kind of a fun thing for, the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where you're like, oh, there it is. Like I know that thing. So
yeah, it's like patches, I guess, or something.
Like patches.
Yeah, like patches or whatever, just light tie-ins that are fun. But the Etrian Odyssey thing is probably the hardest evidence or whatever. But otherwise, everything else is just fun. The dragons basically means nuclear bombs. So there's a possibility that metaphor is just like the super sequel of every Mega 10 game, or maybe a prequel to the SMT. I didn't play SMT, so I have no idea. So
yeah, it's part of me. I remember being really critical, specifically with Black Mirror, when they made it. It's not a spoiler, because you don't know what the episode's about, but there's an episode that ties a lot of the episodes together, and I was like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, I hate that. And then as a writer, I'm really intrigued by it, because like Super Perils of Baking is a book that the pilot of Hybraxia 1 reads to the pilot of Hybraxia 2 when she's a little girl. So it's like, and you only know that if you get to the secret ending of the game. And so it's like, no, I'm cute by half like that too. It's cool.
That's very,
I was very tempted to do that kind of shit. What'd you say?
That's like very Tarantino verse.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, it's cute. It's like, I would want to be cute.
Yeah,
like
Big Kahuna Burger showing up at Jackie Brown or some shit. Exactly.
Yeah.
Love that.
Okay, let's get more into the combat. I guess I am interested to see what you guys think of this, since we're talking about the SMT series, and I guess the influence that series apparently had on the combat here, and the idea of this press turn combat system. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun to be able to manipulate that, and it became difficult to go to dungeons where the weather was such that you couldn't, exploit weaknesses the same way. Changes the entire game and makes it way harder for you to survive too. So for people that are listening, I mean, you know what we're talking about here, but it's the idea that like if an enemy is weak to ice, and then you use ice on that person or that enemy, then your turn will kind of just kick to the next person, and you could theoretically keep a chain going for a pretty long period of time. I think the longest I went, because once you have the Prince class, then you can unlock like the thing where it gives you 6 turns, and you can push that like to the very end. You could probably go like 12 times in a row, something like that, which is pretty crazy and fun. Eventually you get the little jewels instead of the big ones, and that means that no matter what you do on them, it'll just go away once your turn's done. And I love the strategy of churning through characters for the situation at hand by kind of just skipping their turn. and having there's no real detriment to doing that as long as you don't skip 2 turns in a row. So it was quite strategic. It was surprisingly strategic, way more strategic than my experience with Persona 4, way more strategic than my experience even with a game like Trails of Cold Steel, which is way deeper than Persona. I think that this game was surprisingly deep, considering it didn't really require you to move around the map a la Trails of Cold Steel. It has a row system a la Final Fantasy 4 and many other games. So I really, really liked it a lot. And I loved the whole archetype system. I thought it was really cool. And there was something very compelling about going through and grinding those out, and the permanent kind of way that they touch your character once you move on from them, not only with permanent stat increases, but then all the skills that you can unlock using your mag and all the rest. So what did we think of the combat system, Dustin?
Yeah, I'll get my biggest complaint out of the way from the beginning is that while I appreciate that they added this ability to press in the left stick to restart the battle, there's no way to leave a battle other than dying. And this pissed me off greatly when they would get to a point in a battle where I was like, you know what, this isn't going to work. I need to change up not only just my party, which I know you can do in battle, but I need to change up my archetypes. It's like, well, now I just need to die. So then you have to sit through and either like just pass a million times until you die in order to go back. But as far as I could tell, there's no way to load from a save mid-battle unless you just literally turn off the game and reload it. And for a game that, especially with bosses, requires a level of creativity in figuring out your different classes and stuff like that, super annoying and kind of discourages. I don't want to say discourages, I guess, the creativity, but it's not conducive to it. So that really annoyed me. But coming from Persona, and we talked about this a little earlier, is that your party members in Persona only have one persona that has its strengths, its weaknesses, and its list of abilities. And I think there's some modification you can do with that. But and that's cool because you can kind of swap in your team as needed for different situations. But this one is so much more open-ended where anybody can be anything. Whereas in Persona, it's only the main character that can switch out his persona to have anything. So it leads to a lot of creative possibilities that you can figure out by having different sets of people with different archetypes that I thought was really cool. I found, and I think this is just maybe because I wasn't using the archetype system enough at the beginning, is that towards the end when I was trying to get the highest tier archetype for each character, there was one that, like for Heisme, I think, that he needed to be multiple layers removed from being able to get, because that's just how I didn't choose to upgrade him in the way that the game wanted me to by the end in order to get that top archetype. And I was like, well, so then it involved like a mass amount of grinding and using the leaves or whatever in order to do that. And so that bothered me a little bit, but I think that's probably more of a me problem overall. The one thing I want to touch on too is that I think the addition in this game of having the real-time combat in the overworld is good, but I think it could be better in that it's very, very basic. And I know it's supposed to be because it's designed for lower level characters, but there were many times where I'm like, fuck, I just got hit and I don't feel like I deserved it. Or situations like that where the dodge just didn't always feel quite right to me, and the overall overworld combat. So good improvement, especially because it avoids pointless fights, which is a problem in their previous games, but still could be better, I think.
I have a lot to say, but I want to hear everyone else. Brad.
Combat. So like I said earlier, the combat I think was really well done. Really just some nice twists on the SMT formula, Persona formula. Like Dustin was saying, being able to customize your entire party was great. I really liked that kind of stuff because I was able to build characters out in certain ways. Like Juna, I was like, okay, you're going to be my debuff character. Or Yufa, you're going to be the summoner with some healing for off healing. So I really like having that flexibility of just building these characters out who I want. The thing about their master archetypes or whatever, is interesting with Heismay particularly. I think you had to get merchant or something, like the second tier of merchant or whatever that was. Because, he's kind of laid out as a thief character at the beginning, which you needed that. So that makes total sense. But I guess like merchant and stealing can go hand in hand with a thief. Or I forgot what his final thing was. It wasn't ninja, maybe.
Samurai
maybe
or something? Or?
No, samurai was
Stroll.
One of the last Stroll ones.
I should pull this up on the wiki here. I'm on
you can see
I'm on
the
the actual like fandom wiki.
But I appreciated having that flexibility because I like Persona in a sense because it is straightforward with your party members and what they can do and their weaknesses. But just having the extra flexibility adds a new layer of depth to me that I really appreciated with the game. I really like the addition of being able to attack guys on the field. I think that is an interesting solution to dealing with trash mobs because, like you guys are saying, dealing with trash mobs in games and just constantly getting battles can be a problem. I think it was fine. I'm sure they can improve in some ways, but I don't know. I don't really need like crazy combat for that kind of shit when I'm just taking out trash mobs in 1 or 2 hits. I really liked it when especially you're fighting a bigger guy and you have to do like 4 or 5 hits, dodge in, dodge out. That's when I really had the most fun with it. So maybe you can get a little more crazy there. But overall, I think it was a really good turn-based system. I wonder if they'll ever go beyond the rock, paper, scissors element for their games, but maybe that's just kind of a staple for their combat weaknesses and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's an improvement over Persona. I'm really curious if they'll change it in the future. And yeah, I love the Archetype system because I like job systems for Final Fantasy a lot. So that's my kind of shit.
By the way, it's Thief, Assassin, Ninja, Royal Thief. Warrior is Warrior, Swordmaster, Samurai, Royal Warrior. So it's the answer to that. Gene, I'm curious where you are on combat and the playing of the game. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah. I, like you, I really appreciate like the strategic press turn aspect of it. I like trying to think of. I love it when a turn-based game is actually making me consider the next several turns. Right. And then for me, that is the mark of a great turn-based battle system. That to me is why I loved Dragon Quest XI so much, because Dragon Quest XI like really is like you need like every turn it must be considered, and if you fuck up this one turn, then you might fuck up the whole fight, right? And certainly some of the fights toward the end, the Louise fight at the end was very difficult, and but there's so many different ways to circumvent that. The ultimate food in the game just lets you just skip turns completely, which is incredible. It just breaks the game completely. So I really appreciate like the flexibility that the game gave you. Part of the reason why I love this game so much is because I just really love the real time aspect of it. Because I'm a real time action guy. Ultimately, I love that, but I do love a good turn-based fight, and that's why Metaphor just gives me both of what I love. I love that even if you attack and throw one of the enemies off balance, you can dodge out of it, so you can keep attacking that person in real time versus entering a turn-based battle, and that just made it so easy to grind through. And Persona 5 actually has something like that, where if you increase Ryuji's confidant rank, then he can do auto kills on certain enemies. But then in that game, you don't even get an experience penalty. You just get your flat experience throughout. So you can just grind that way without ever having a real fight. What I liked about Metaphor is that it would still give you half or a lesser experience if you try to beat them in the real time. And in that way, that's how the game kind of balances you out. And for me, that's how it did. I was actually over leveled for a lot of the game all the way up until the end, where I realized I wasn't killing these enemies in one hit anymore, and I needed to fight. And that was the game telling me like, oh, you need to. We're back up to speed now. We're now evenly matched. Mm-hmm. So if you want to grind here in the final dungeon, and I did. Then I really appreciate the game communicating that to me. It just made everything feel so player friendly, and even if the game did feel long, it was things like that that kept me pushing me forward and be like, oh yeah, well I can just play a little bit more, and like now that I'm evened out, I should I should dive back into the fight system and figure this out and get myself over leveled again so I can have fun with the real time fight.
Yeah, the very last dungeon's so funny just from that perspective of you can go back and just heal for the only time in the game by sleeping and then going back into the same dungeon without losing any time.
Exactly. Yeah. That the last dungeon is so end game grind friendly where you just run back to Neurus and you just bleak and then you just go back to that enemy fountain of teeth and just keep killing them over and over again.
Right, exactly. And I think it's funny you bring on this up because I think it's a major part of the game to me is how easy it is to break the game, but that I think the game demands it. It's not like bad design necessarily. What I discovered, I didn't really have problems with the game until I was doing the optional bosses, and then I found them all pretty difficult, and I beat them all 4 of them.
Yeah, the dragons were tough,
but I needed help. Like I was like, what am I supposed to do here, man? Like, I don't know. And I would look it up, and I would often discover, a series of websites that would give you all these tips, but then often it would drive you to these Reddit threads where people would just have in the comments, even just like, this is what I did. And that's how I like found a lot of these different solutions was like, you can, if you have these characters and these classes unlocked and these skills, you can break this battle to the degree where like the boss will barely even be able to go.
Just barely do anything.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, that's so cool that because there's it's like Psycho Mantis and Metal Gear Solid. It's like you're breaking the game, but that's how you have to do it. Like there's no other real option but to break the game. You can't survive the 9,999 hit point attacks. You can't, like, you got to make it so the game, in other words, comes off broken sometimes, but it's more like and I hate bringing this game up over and over again, but it's more of like a Final Fantasy VI-esque Phantom Train, use the Phoenix down on him and he'll die in one hit sort of thing. It's like, no, we built that into the game. It's broken. Like we broke it ourselves. And, or using a metal blade on Metal Man in Mega Man 2 and killing him in one hit, his own weapon. And it's like, no, we know, like we understand.
Congrats, you figured it out.
Right, exactly. And I think
that's what the game. That's what I feel like the game is telling me. It's like, hey, congratulations, you found the easy lane.
Right,
have fun now.
And and I think in some of those fights, unless you are really like max leveled, I think you would really need to break the game like that. And like I couldn't imagine fighting, especially the last, like the dragon in which all the bad dragon battles culminate into this final dragon battle. It's fucking really hard, and you have to break it to the point where you have to like expose his weaknesses to like negate his own turns, and it's like this is unsurvivable. And the game will, I don't know if you guys noticed this, the game will kill you automatically if you go in with certain setups. Like the game will just cast these spells on you that will make it impossible. So like it's knowing you're breaking it, and it's not allowing you to break it in certain ways, which I thought was really interesting. The one thing I'll say, and I don't know if you guys experienced this as well, and I don't remember this from Persona 4, although maybe it was like that and you guys can remind me, is your normal attacks do nothing in this game. I can't say, I might have used normal melee attack 1 in 100 choices. Like the game seems so MP driven, in my opinion, that I couldn't imagine people playing it without using the mage class to reap MP to stay in dungeons. That's what I did constantly. I don't know if Brad, it seems like you have something to say about this, because I was surprised by I was like, nothing works but skills and magic.
All of the skills are definitely more powerful than your normal abilities, but it depends on the enemy you're fighting, because your weapon, depending on what it is, can do a weakness to some enemies and give you that extra turn, like the crossbow or whatever, or the spear can give you pierce damage. So those are things to factor in. But of course, if you're spending NP, you expect the ability to be stronger. So they are stronger. So there is a risk reward system in that way. But
I would also say, because I understand what you're
early game.
I understand what you're saying, but to me, because of the SMT system, doing a weaker attack just to buy a turn is the same as skipping that turn. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense to you? The only option, it would just give you a big diamond or a big jewel instead of a little jewel, so you could skip that turn if you wanted to. But there's really no advantage other than doing chip damage. That's why I just felt like that was kind of broken in some sense, where it's like, no, I can use the stab attack with the pierce attack, get the extra turn, or I can just skip, and that turn never went away. And then I didn't do 50 hit points of damage or whatever. Like, who gives a shit? That's kind of the way I read it personally.
I think it always seemed worth it to me just to get that extra turn, just for even a little chip damage, depending on the enemy. Some bosses, sure, it's not going to really matter, but everyday grunts, yeah, it could go a long way, I feel like. And it's more of an early game thing, I feel like you use until you start getting crazy ass abilities. But that's just kind of every turn-based RPG, in my opinion, pretty much.
Well, I was surprised by, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna say, I was surprised by once you start unlocking skills, like, and start being able to replenish MP after battles or in the middle of turns and stuff like that. I did find that I was just using insane spells all the time and never using MP. Like, and it became less and less of a problem. That first dungeon, I did it in one day, and I was in that dungeon for 5 hours.
Wow.
So, because like you had to like constantly grind the MP, you know, and it's why my will character, and I don't know if this is supposed to happen or whatever, but I was just like, my will was just a mage because I was constantly using that fucking skill to reap MP. And then I think I interrupted you, Dustin. I think I heard your voice.
No? I don't think so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were trying to chime in. Maybe it was Brad. Were you trying to chime in?
I might have just said yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say now.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all good. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
I just felt like it was a game that was so MP dependent, depending on almost any other role-playing game I've ever played. Actually, I can't think of any other one that's quite like that. And since there are it wouldn't be a problem if you had like tents and save points, and like when you go into the rooms to rest, but you regain no MP and HP. It's all part of the design. I think the game, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is, and this is what I say in my notes, is that though the game is imperfect from a gameplay perspective, it seems a lot of it is designed to be imperfect, and that the game would be frustrating if it didn't allow you to do these certain things. Like if that MP grind thing didn't happen, this game would be fucking impossibly hard, in my opinion. You would have to leave and go back to dungeons constantly. So there is anyway.
Well, there's like items and food you can make to help with that stuff. Like even in Persona games, MP management is a big part of going through the palace. That's what keeps you from doing it all in one day. So I think it's a built-in thing. Like I didn't do the dungeon in one day because I was like, I don't want to fucking sit here and grind for 4 hours or whatever like you did. That's totally fine if you want to do that.
Someone's at my door. I'm sorry. You guys keep going.
Oh, no. Go ahead. But I was just going to say, I think that's kind of standard affair. Don't you, Dustin, as someone who's played a lot of Persona games and stuff like that?
Yeah, I, in Persona, was really good at doing it in one day. And I think you and I had a conversation early on where I'm like, dude, I can't do this dungeon in one day. But I think that they fundamentally, the system, the calendar, such we haven't gone into fully, is so much more forgiving in this game as in a Persona game. So I'm coming in with the mindset that's like every day that's wasted means more stress later on in order to do all my social links and stuff like that. And that simply is not the case in this game, where you could probably take 2 or 3 days per dungeon the entire game and still have time left over at the end to do that. So I think, though, as Colin was saying, as the game goes on, though, your MP, whether it's through items or regeneration abilities, passive abilities, stuff like that, does get much easier, and it's not something you have to worry about as much later on.
That's totally that's a natural thing in RPGs for me, is like you start to feel more powerful, and that's just how it goes in every RPG. Some limitations that once existed are meaningless now. It's a player power thing, I feel like, and it's all about ramping that up at a good pace. Yeah, because like how many RPGs, when you really think about it, are you doing a basic attack, just like your normal attack at the end of the game? Not too often. You're using abilities or MP or something like that. And some characters you use like Basilio, starts the Berserker, so he's using health instead of MP and stuff like that. So there's some rotation in that, I guess. I don't know. What do you think, Gene?
Yeah, I had no real trouble with. I feel like I actually beat most of the dungeons in one day. Actually,
it took 1 or 2 days.
One or 2 days, yeah. The 2 days at the most. It was interesting to play Persona, where Persona 5 in particular would force you to basically go home. Where they're like, "Oh, you hit the wall in this dungeon." So, it was interesting that in Persona 5 it's written into the progress of the game that you actually have to leave the dungeon. Whereas I feel like in Metaphor it didn't really happen so much. You can just hang out in the dungeon for as long as you want, right? Was there a moment where you had to leave, kind of? I don't know.
In Persona?
Yeah, in Metaphor.
Oh, in Metaphor. There is the one situation where you I'm trying to remember like when with the Luis fight at the end where it's like you don't have a dungeon and you're building up to a day that's just a boss fight.
Oh yeah,
which is kind of interesting and different, but I'm trying to think of a situation where you have to leave. I don't.
Yeah, but see that's another example of how this game structure is different from Persona, where it's just like, oh, things are just, you know, like this whole day is just a boss fight now, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So, it's much more forgiving, I feel like.
Colin's back. We're just talking about, you know, the dungeon pacing and everything like that too.
Cool. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It was a delivery. It was the cops here to arrest me for being a herb.
Oh shit.
No, yeah, it was just a delivery I had to sign for. The presents are coming in hot. You know?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Nice.
All right. What else is there to talk about? There's so much to talk about actually. What do we think of Dustin, do you have something to say?
Well, I'm ready at any point. Maybe it's better to save this for the end. My Festivus of metaphor with the airing of grievances.
Sure, yeah.
Of the plot that I've written out.
No, let's. Yeah, I want to hear it. I mean, I
want to hear it. Yeah,
let's do it. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, I think this game's strengths is its overall themes, its overall messages, its characters. But there are so many points in this game where I feel like the plot is so stupid and things that do not make sense when you think about them deeper than a surface level. And Gina's right. This is also the case in Persona games. I do feel like some of them are particularly egregious in this game. I
think they're worse here. I agree that they're worse here. So they don't bother me as much, but I see your point, Dustin.
And my point,
I enjoy that there's a whole Reddit thread debating on what the moment that Dustin hates so much is. So,
I saw that.
So here's the answer.
So and to be clear, I don't want this to be like a fucking Cinema Sins video where I'm listing out everything. These are the things that bothered me the most, and I touched on one of these earlier. Is that for the most part, death in this game doesn't mean anything. So Grius at the beginning is a character who dies. And I was like, oh shit, this game's got stakes. I like that. There's a party member who you lose early on. I did not expect that. After that moment, though, we have many deaths that are quickly reverted, sometimes with minutes later. And of course, the moment that the Reddit was speculating about, most of them were right, is Luis's death after the spear is thrown into him. So the way this is explained is that Zorba, who is a necromancer, is able to heal him overnight. Which also, by the way, Zorba fucking dies in the first. He falls off the fucking Grand Trad.
He's okay, though.
He's okay. Somehow, I think it explains it in like one of the things like, oh, Luis was able to save him.
He landed in some hay.
It's Assassin's Creed. He fell in some hay. He's fine.
I thought he like did some spell on himself to resurrect him or something.
Yeah. He was just too hot to die. That's all.
Maybe.
Dude, okay, yeah. Zorba, being one of the weirdest fucking looking dudes in the series, is able to infiltrate the ranks of the church. Mind you, at this point, he's got one giant fucking horn sticking out of his head and a beet red third eye, but he's got a hood on, so it's okay. That's fine. I'm willing to deal with that. But so yeah, Luis dies, and in a very Rise of Skywalker moment, somehow he's returned because this guy who is a necromancer is able to just heal him. So that's the first one. Then in the end, in the final dungeon, basically the entire fucking team dies, or what looks like they're supposed to die. There's this great moment with Stroll where they see Luis's thing, the walker thing, fly away, and
Gauntlet runner or whatever,
his gauntlet runner, right? And he makes this sacrifice, and as he's falling to his death, he's like, I finally have lived up to my name as a noble, because he sacrifices himself for the greater good. And I'm like, at that moment, I was like, holy shit, if this game involves killing off the entire team, that's actually fucking awesome, because there's so much sacrifice. There's so much to be lost for this one purpose, this grand purpose. I love that shit. It was bold, but I was like, damn. But no. Oh, hold on. I got another important point with this. Nuris fucking flies the gauntlet runner into Luis's like it's fucking 9/11. Just boom, huge thing of fire. Oh no. Okay, and by the way, the gauntlet runner could, according to him, could barely make it in the first place. It lands, it explodes, but he survives. He miraculously saves everyone else on the team.
He's that nice with it, man. He's that nice with it.
So
it would have been cool if he would have died at that point.
Yeah, because he's not a party member. Too,
yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
He's like a Sid type character in some sense, although Sid was a party member. But you got my meaning.
He was a Sid character. That's right. Yeah, I didn't even for some reason.
Or like Setzer or something like that. You know?
Yeah.
This is all in tandem at the same time that the main character, who's getting turned into a human again, in order to avoid it, rips his own fucking heart out, which I thought was actually pretty sick.
Yeah.
But he's just fine because of the magic of the book.
It's a metaphor.
More saves him. He's good to go. His team is good to go. They're fine.
And
what's
Dustin,
funny? What's funny too is that I was thinking about this morning, and I was like, oh, there is another character that dies. And that would be the social link. Is it Alfonso?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
he dies. And I realized that I was like, oh, there's this one last thing to do for his quest line. I forgot about it. So when I finished the game yesterday, and I was, or 2 days ago, and I was doing all the things where you talk to all the different social links one last time, I'm like, dude, it's actually kind of sick that he sacrificed himself for the election. And then when I was looking this morning, I was like, oh shit, if I would have done that thing, guess what? He doesn't die either.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like,
he's fine.
Yeah,
he's just fine.
He's fine.
He's the trickster, man. The ultimate trickster.
Gotcha.
So
gotcha, bitch.
Gotcha.
The deaths in this, the reversal, especially with how quick it happens, deeply annoyed me.
Forden stays dead. That's nice.
Forden stays dead. Rella
what about
dead.
the lady with the baby human and everything like that? She just got clapped real quick. I was like,
Joanna stays dead. You know,
hey, cool.
She stays dead.
That was sick.
That was cool. That was a real moment.
Let's talk about Rella for a second, because this is probably my most Cinema Sins like complaint.
Oh, boy.
Really? I didn't have an issue with Rella.
My problem with Rella is that she you find out she's the one that cursed the prince. She was blackmailed by the church to do this. She's 12 years old. Okay. Which the way that her model look shows in the flashback and the anime scene where you see the assassin look completely different. That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. We can ignore that.
Okay, whatever.
She gets slashed in the back by Hulkenberg. Okay. So she does the curse. She fucks it up. She's running away. Hulkenberg fucking slashes a 12-year-old in the back, and then she teleports away. But at the same time, Hulkenberg's like, oh, Rella, if you hadn't shown up to help the prince, he would have died. So this 12-year-old assassin gets fucking slashed in the back, teleports away. Maybe she used magic to like quickly heal her back, and then shows back up in order to save the prince. Bit of a stretch, in my opinion.
No, I don't think so, because she is literally the best healer in the land. So it would be no problem for her to be like, bloop, and then just go back, and she feels guilty about doing what she did with the prince. So she's like, oh well, I fucked up. I didn't even fucking kill him. You know, I meant to kill him. And now I have him in this comatose state. So let me try to see what I can do, you know, because she does feel guilty about that.
Great poker face for a 12-year-old in this situation, in the most horrifying situation of her life.
Yeah. Bird lady. She's got a little more grit.
Yeah. Two more things.
Okay.
This one's very minor. I think that at some point, this isn't really a plot thing. This is just a story thing, or the game in general, is that there's moments of like weird fluff that don't make any sense on why they're even in the game, other than to just pad the runtime. The one that comes to mind is when you're going into the opera house in order to assassinate Luis, and there's the guard that drops the key. It's like, where's the key? And then this guy's like, oh, I'm missing my gold tooth. So you have to find his gold tooth and then trade it for the key.
Oh, I don't even remember that.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's actually a really important, because you can exchange a bunch of items at that point if you find them.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the items I didn't exchange, and when I got one of the tips I was reading from Reddit about like, oh, so you have to use this particular relic or whatever item accessory. And you found it at this point if you gave this dude his fucking whatever. And I was like, oh, I didn't do that. So I missed that.
This last one is the biggest point that kind of bothered me. And I'm curious what you guys think, because maybe I'm wrong. I'm totally willing to be wrong about this. There's a huge message in this game about the fantasy of democracy, that this society, this world has lived under kings. And in the book, this idea of a democracy that people choose the king is this like ultimate fantasy, right? And then this world is presented with an election, and it's crazy. And some people are into it, some people aren't. But the message is like the people should choose who their leaders are. And that's kind of the point of the king as well. But this message at the same time is completely undermined by the fact that the king basically set up this whole situation in order to continue the exact same thing with his son, the prince, and giving him all of these, setting up that he has the powers of the archetypes, his mom, who somehow has the ability to be without a body but still alive, which that's fine. Again, I'm willing to deal with that for fantasy related purposes, but the democracy is totally undermined by the king himself in order to get, hopefully, his plan of getting the prince to become the king. So
I thought it was the mom's plan, not the king's plan. The king didn't know that the son was still alive. It fell into the place that the son just happened to be there, but the mom knew that the mom was the one who separated Moore out from Hythlodius and separated Will out from the prince, like through her magic.
Right.
And yeah, like the mom's power is unexplained, but like who is Igor in Persona, really?
Right. So. Yeah. That doesn't even bother me too much. That's not really.
Yeah. I do think that it was a mom's plan to set the prince up, not so much the king.
I wish I could remember more specifically the sequence where Moore / the king is talking to his wife, because I feel like there is indication that he was kind of in on it, but I don't, even just from a few days ago, I don't exactly remember that. Yeah. So anyway, my overall point is just that I feel like the plot at many points,
it is funny that the whole thing is about representation, and it just ends up being about the same lineage anyways. So, yeah.
Right.
I get that. He earned it this time, though, I guess.
Okay, so I have a question, and I think
it's like if we decided to elect Hunter Biden after everything that's happened,
right?
And it's like, no, Hunter's cool though, He likes Fleet Foxes, so
I have a question about Luis's plan that maybe I don't understand. Luis's plan is that he's going to turn everybody into humans, and at that point, the strong people will be able to revert back, right? And that's going to be the next line of strong people. Isn't that kind of what already happened with, when they get the explanation of how people got turned into humans with the discovery of magic, and then all that remained was humans and the Eldas that overcame it, and then all the other races came from the Elda, and then this is when all the problems started to arise. And so in one sense, Luis is like kind of just trying to do the same thing that already happened and already didn't work out.
Yeah, that's the most human thing in history, I feel like.
Yeah. Right.
People always do that shit throughout history. But this time he's like, well, I'm going to do it different this time, though. I got my own spin on it.
That's a good point.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to do communism different. That's the line we hear. I guess on a separate example, not that this is like communism, but it's like, oh, well, when we do it this time, it's going to be different because we understand it.
Mm-hmm. I did like the one positive I took out of the whole election thing was I just liked how it was like a spiritual election wherein there weren't ballots, but rather it was known how people felt and
vibes.
Right. It was cool to see the number change, even though it was totally arbitrary. And I don't know if you guys got to the point where like the number wouldn't change because you were like too far ahead of where you were supposed to be with the things you were doing on the side. But I thought that was a really interesting idea.
You must have been so fucking advanced using that guide. Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, no, I was killing.
That
I
must
mean,
be hilarious.
I actually felt at times that there were a couple of times. The reason it took me as long as it did actually was because there were a couple of times that the game puts you into a situation, or the guide puts you, like the calendar that they suggest puts you into a place where you're like, actually, this is really fucking hard. And I don't think I'm supposed to be here, but I like put my shoulder into it anyway. I did end up breaking the guide a little bit towards like the last 2/5 of it by not doing certain things that they were telling me to do, because I was just doing things out of order when I realized that I was going to have a lot of time at the end. Because I was looking at, I never looked ahead. I didn't want to spoil the calendar for myself, so I didn't really look at it. And then I actually went towards the end, and I realized that like there were a couple of weeks where I was like, do whatever you want, do whatever you want, do whatever you want, do whatever you want, do whatever you want. So I was like, oh shit, there's a lot of space here for me to
I've been remarking throughout the podcast that it's funny that you decided to choose this particular Atlus game to do a guide with when it's very clear that they designed the game to be less guide dependent than ever before,
which I totally appreciate. I also think that I still wouldn't have found everything
for sure
and done everything, so I am grateful for using it.
Did you get the platinum?
No, the platinum requires 2 playthroughs. I'm not gonna. I didn't even go into it with that in mind. That's why I was trying to tell people. They're like, oh, he's doing anything for trophies. I'm like, it's really not about trophies. It's just about. There are certain games that I just know that I'm not going to get the platinum in, or I simply don't care. Like the Final Fantasy VII games. It's like, well, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to. First of all, you can't do it in one playthrough, and I'm just not going to care about that. The Last of Us, or games that I really care about. I try to focus on them for different reasons. So the reason that I wanted to use the guide was to simply guide myself through the calendar in a efficient way. But you're absolutely right in the sense that I didn't need to do that as far as social links and time management was concerned. But my experience with Persona 4 was the exact opposite. And that, of course, and I know people were telling me this. I mean, I think Dustin was saying it, that he had read it, that the game is much looser. But you have to understand that when I played Persona 4 Golden, I made one mistake and fucked the entire thing up. Like,
for sure.
There was no time for me to fix. And it had to do with that stupid dog or that wolf or whatever. I think it's a dog, right?
Yeah.
And how like I got the social link to like the 9th level or whatever it was. And then it was raining the last day or something. And he doesn't show up. And I was like, you fucks. That's why I stopped playing. I was like, I can't believe this. Like, this is crazy that you have to be this tight with it. And that was, I think, so I think people understand more of my perspective from that, where I was like, dude, I did this by the fucking book, except for one thing. And it was like, nope. And so it's like, how does anyone see anything in these games? You know? So I'm a little bit scarred from that experience, I guess. And I'll probably get back to Persona 4 when inevitably it's remade and re-released.
Yep.
Okay. And the other thing I really liked too about the story, and again, I the in the weeds stuff, I'm like, there's cool things and I want to talk about some of them, but I didn't really give a shit. I mean, I was following along. But I was like, no, I'm into this more because it's like the combat's kind of fun. The growth is kind of fun. I like the ancillary characters, like your followers are really fun. But I loved the whole concept of royal magic and how the magic would stop the candidates from being killed. I thought I thought that was not only a fucking sick idea, but it was represented really cool too with the chains. How like the person would be stopped like a millimeter before the killing blow.
Because Grievous was gonna die like completely. Like the game foreshadows like Grievous dying like so hard at the beginning. Grievous is like, son, would you hang out with my daughter more often? And everyone's like, don't worry, we're all gonna come back and have dinner together after tonight. And then he's gonna die, but then the way he dies is amazing, and it was through royal magic. That was very surprising. Yeah, so it's interesting that they use a plot device that they very, very clearly foreshadowed and everyone can see coming, but use it in a surprising way.
I loved the whole. It was Majora's Mask, like really, in the way that it represented like this huge globe in the sky with like a face on it and a series of faces, and it was very weird. It's like it's very unique from my perspective, from the things I've played and seen and watched and whatever read. And yeah, I did like how they were trying to create like this idea of like a benevolent constitutional monarchy or something after like all of these years of like absolutism. And so, but I did, and it gets into what you were saying, Dustin, about the story and how it kind of loses itself. What it really, people get mad when I do this, like what it should have been about or whatever, but it's like the cool thing about the game was how none of these people could die. And trying to figure out slowly how to like shatter each person's protection to try to get like, like making in other words, making like a greater series of lieutenants that are all protected by a similar magic. And you kind of have to unravel it. And each person's unraveling is kind of different. I think kind of would have been cool because I really thought that was just a neat idea that they can't just be confronted. You can't just like brute force them. You can't raise an army of 100,000 and just capture Luis. You can't like, there's just nothing you do. And I thought that was the futility, I think, would have played into the utopian ideal.
Yeah. I thought it was funny when the king became like the Majora's Mask moon and he's protecting Luis. I thought he was just going to like be like, this motherfucker killed me and letting everyone know right away. But he's just like, nah, it's cool. Don't worry about it. And I was just like, what the fuck, man? You're putting everyone through this shit. Just make that guy the king or something. I don't know. What was that king doing?
I don't know.
He's fucking out of his mind.
He was too fair-minded, I guess, in some sense.
Yeah, and he's like, here, everyone here, no one can die. Luis, you can't die. And Luis is like, all right, I'll play by the rules. It's like, I'm surprised he just didn't start fucking killing people and take over by force.
Also, one of the underexplored things for me, I guess this has to do with Sanctism, but that group of lieutenant characters that were like at the table.
Yeah,
they
needed more.
The Illuminati.
Yeah, it's like, I thought we were gonna like fight all these dudes. It's like, to me, it's because I love my lieutenant characters in JRPGs.
For sure,
it's something I'm really focused on in our game at Lilymo, and it's like, so I thought when they showed them, I'm like, oh, it's like the fucking big armored dude, the nerdy cleric, and the and I was like, but they just end up being these characters that you really only see in cutscenes.
I thought that was interesting. I thought that was like, because they're so like well designed. They're so like clearly like boss coded, like, yeah, exactly. Like, this is the armor guy. And then this is
the armor guy was fucking cool.
He's going to turn into a big tentacle monster, like a fucking Resident Evil biohazard monster. And it's like, nope, they just,
I like that one guy's glasses that were just like little lines, basically. It was super,
that was weird. Cool. The bald guy.
Yeah. They have really cool designs. And they're just like, I know.
Gene, those guys in that meeting room, I was like, dude, this is like Seele.
It's just Seele coded,
yeah.
Seele, whatever. But that's exactly what they were. But then you don't fight Seele or Seele either. They just fuck off too.
What about your followers? I'm curious what you guys, if there are any of them that stick out to you. There's two that I wanted to discuss personally. First of all, I really like the character of Gallica. I just really took to that character. I thought she was super adorable. I loved the voice acting. It was very soft. And it felt like a companion that's on your shoulder, that's trying to give you advice. It was just very well executed. And I thought it was so adorable how she would put armor on when they go into the dungeons. I thought that was like super cute. That's
so great.
At the same time, I couldn't think of just like one of those enemies just taking her and like hitting her like a baseball bat with a baseball bat, and anime style, like it turns into a little star in the sky, like ding, and she like flies off into the distance. But regardless of what she was wearing, but I loved that character. But I actually dug the character of Brigitte, because her story is really cool.
Mommy, yeah.
In that she, I like that her whole thing is that like she's wrong, and this is where I was again. I don't want to linger on this too much, but I guess I'm just so surprised by people like it's so obviously a progressive game, and I'm like, Brigitte's character is about how like she's totally wrong about people with money, and that she's created this monster she can't control. I'm like, I think it's really balanced in some sense and really nuanced. How she's like, she can't control this thing she's put into the world, and that like her instincts were so convincing and so charismatic that she couldn't bring it back. And I was like, dude, there's like so many instances like this in the game. So I really liked that character a lot. I also liked Elphys and felt bad for him because he was like such a nice guy, but everyone was so mean to him and everyone thought he was like a monster, and the kids were running away from him and all of that. So, oh no, I'm sorry. Katarina is the character I was talking about, not Brigitte.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I was totally wrong.
Oh, yeah. The very socialist one.
Right. I'm sorry. I was totally wrong about that. Katarina.
Brigitte's the mommy,
the merchant.
Mommy.
Yeah,
the
like
merchant.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So I'm talking about the brawler Katarina. That she's the one that is like the head of this like rabble, and they're like they want to string up the rich.
Yeah.
And then at some point she realizes like, oh shit.
Oh, they're not so bad. Yeah. At the end.
I thought,
this game's very centrist in a way. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and I thought Maria was cute too. Like, I like how they eventually bring her out with them, and she gets to like kind of see the world. She's not so like sheltered. I wonder if they do a sequel or something, or some sort of another game in this world, if she plays some sort of role in it. But to me, I mean, I just read it as similar to the character in Persona 4. What was the little girl's name?
Nanako,
yeah.
Nanako.
It's just like some cute, relatable, childlike, innocent, ignorant. It's like some sort of prism through which to see the world in the most
future. Yeah.
Right. In the most innocent way about like what the future could be.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, who are some of the Gene, I'm curious, who are some of the followers that stood out to you?
I really love Gallica too. Shout out to Gallica. I thought she was her voice never got annoying as a fairy companion character. She never got annoying.
Listen.
She was always She was she was always very grounded in her advice. She was always very aware about what was going on. When I knew this was a special game is when she like casts magic on you and it's music. And then, when she says music is the first magic spell after all, I was like, oh, this game is awesome. to call music magic, that is awesome. And then the fact that it like played into the ending, I love that. What other characters were there? I did like Brigitte. I liked everything about her. Obviously, she was beautiful, but I liked her very tragic story about the dog, and the dog was alive, thank goodness.
I know. I would have been so upset.
Oh, another non-death
dog. Yes, exactly.
Another death with no consequence for most of the game.
Yeah,
quote unquote. But then nope, dog is all right.
I that would bother me, Dustin. I totally see your point. The only reason why it doesn't bother me is because this game is meant to be like a ridiculous fantasy, like where the happy ending is the point of the game.
Right.
Like you're supposed to get to the happy ending where everyone's alive. I thought Hulkenberg was cute. I thought, like we knew that Stroll suddenly isn't just like the horny, goofy guy, and then you meet Hulkenberg and she's like super serious, but then she's actually like. She's always about eating and she's always kind of goofy and she has these like personal hangups about other people, and it's like, oh, it turns out that they actually kind of transferred some of the goofiness to the girl, which is fun and interesting,
Yeah, I like the strategy, like when you sit down with her to play strategy games.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, Heismay, I've seen him. I've talked about him, and I've seen him described as anti-Sephiroth, in that he is an edgelord for empathy. He's just super edgy about thinking about what you're feeling and understanding your position. That's
awesome.
Whereas Sephiroth is like, I hate the world and I need to stay alive forever. And but Heismay is just complete opposite. He's wonderful. And
he was awesome.
His voice acting is incredible. Juna was okay, kind of cool. She was probably the least fleshed out character. But yeah,
who was your? We should all answer this too. Like, who was your go-to party? Did you have one?
Oh. Yeah, mine was of course Will. Obviously, Will, Heismay, and either Stroll or Basilio at the end.
Oh, interesting.
That's my other favorite character, Fidelio. I loved Fidelio so much.
Oh yeah,
him his little fancy coat.
The Tsundere character.
Yeah,
he's someone that dies, right?
That's right. Dustin, he dies. He fucking dies, and he never comes back.
Okay, so yeah, he's another. There are a few deaths that are meaningful.
Yeah. I kind of cheered up when he died. When Juna was holding up his hand, and I was like, oh man, the last thing he actually gets to see is Juna, and he's thinking about the Dinah with Basilio, and it's like the voice acting was so good. And
it was.
Killed the simp.
Really, really hit me, and I really fell for Basilio being all alone and like that whole story. Yeah, it just made me sad. So yeah, Fidelio. Shout out to Fidelio. He was actually kind of my favorite character throughout the whole game.
Where are you on this, Brad? Who are some of the followers characters that you liked, and of course, who was your party?
So the party members were usually Stroll, Hulkenberg, then it became Euphia at the end because she was like my main healer and she had summons as well. Hulkenberg used the entire game because when I got Paladin, then I got Dark Knight with her. I was just fucking shredding for a long time. And Stroll just did a ton of damage. But I used Juna quite a bit for boss fights because she was my debuff and buff character a lot. So I bring her out for that kind of stuff. As terms of like party members, yeah, Heismay, my boy. Loved that guy. His story about his son and like how his son died is pretty graphic, getting trampled by like a crowd and everything like that, and just trying to bury or find a place for his son to rest, man. That's some really heavy shit. And him just dealing with grief and learning to live and not wanting to die anymore. That was heavy, powerful stuff. He was by far my favorite character in the game. I did like Basilio and Fidelio as well too, though. They were kind of like the asshole characters that were fun to have around. The Uneasy Alliance characters, which I really liked having. Of course, they became good guys.
Real quick, also, the great thing about Basilio is that Basilio solves the problem that Persona had, where Persona's last party member just kind of shows up at the end of the story, and you don't really get to know them very well. Whereas Basilio and Fidelio are just kind of like they even become part of your party throughout like one of the adventures. So they tag along, you get to know them, and then by the time Basilio actually joins the party, you have a real sense of familiarity and you have a strong sense of its arc. So yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all good. I liked Maria too. I did actually feel like a strong sense of responsibility for her and taking care of her. You know, you were kind of asked to watch it. And of course, her dad just fucking died like right away. So, and her dealing with just being these different young kids being the situation, I really empathize with. So I thought that was really great. And I actually like Neuris a lot too. Just this kind of old kooky guy, but once you get to know him, he's got a lot going on, very thoughtful. And I liked collecting the artifacts for him.
Yeah, it's cool how he just destroys them, basically, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I really like the cast all around. Like what was her name from Persona 3? Dustin? Yuriko? You're the first girl you get, the bow. What's her name? Yuri?
Oh.
She reminded me of her, though, a lot. Or like, even her design. I was like, oh, it's her, but a fairy this time around. A little less sassy, though, I'd say. A little bit.
Yukari.
Yeah, Yukari, that's right. But I like that she had your back like the entire game. She's a great... I for sure thought she was going to become like turn into like a normal sized person or something like that and be on the party. And I thought she would be the romance for the main character. I thought for sure that was going to happen, but it did not, to my surprise. But yeah, Heisme, shout out, best character of the year.
Dustin, who do you have? Who's your party and any other characters you want to call out?
My party, it seems like we have a similar theme that I almost always had Stroll and Hulkenberg on the party. I really liked Hulkenberg's ability to kind of be the tank and direct the damage towards her was really useful. And then for the most, I actually spent a good deal of time with all the other characters as the third slot or the fourth slot, I guess, with Heisme more towards the beginning, mostly because there was no other option, though I did use him later. And then I think for the end, I was using Juna a lot because I was using her against the dragons to kind of like debuff them and give them different weaknesses to get more turns and stuff like that. Favorite characters, I'm with Brad, Heisme, and of course, I mean, Heisme is a character that has dealt with something that is very similar to me in my life in the past year. Obviously, dealing with things in a very different way than me, but being able to empathize with that character, and seeing his journey and the acceptance, the moving on from, I guess not moving on with the grief, but learning to live with it in a way that is healthy, I think was really cool. And then my least favorite character, probably Juna. Though I do like the part where she shows you her real form. And she's like the little kid squishy version of herself. was cute. I liked that. I think Yufa is also a neat character, and her arc overall in that we have these two predominant religions and they're both have problems, but in very different ways, where the Sanctus Church has a political corruption problem within the church of corrupt people trying to take over the government, things like that. Not good. But Yufa's religion has a problem where there's a core problem with their doctrine, and her ability to see through that and reform, I thought, was a really interesting way to show like the two sides of the coin of different religions having issues. So also, she's just bae, as I was saying earlier. I feel like she should be the canon romance to kind of unite the two sides of the kingdom with the prince, or I guess the king, and having her be the queen at the end. But unfortunately, not in this game.
Got that third eye fetish, Dustin?
I got the third eye fetish.
Put
now,
on that
dude.
fucking mask.
You
Put on a
still see
paper
it through the
bag.
mask.
Do
Oh,
anything. I don't want to see that
Put a
shit.
headband on.
I found it so fucking disturbing. Like, I hated looking at Yufa. I was like, God.
What a freak.
Yeah, you fucking freak. Go back to your little island. You pagan.
Just being racist.
I know exactly, like the exact opposite of what the game's supposed to be about. I am like an NPC in the world.
Yeah.
You're that fucking kid at the beginning. He's like, ew, a fucking elder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gross. I did like
and
the whole
that kid says in the end too. I love it.
I did like the whole thing with Yufa's people though, about that they did wear these masks or whatever, and it looked cool. The game did a really cool job. I mean, it was very overt in terms of like it's the racial dynamic of what the game is supposed to be representing, or if not racial, like societal or civilizational dynamic. Is they did a cool job of making it things truly different. That's why I think Heisme and his race stand out so much, because it's not everyone is truly like animal like. It's really just them, and that makes them stand out as opposed to these like kind of more humanoid style characters that I really liked. I wanted to give a shout out to Fabienne. I thought she was a cool character as well. The innkeeper.
She's mommy.
She
I'm
is
not into furry shit at all.
Yes.
But she's
It got
mommy.
me questioning.
Yeah.
With that bushy tail.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so I liked her a lot, and
get up all in a bush.
And my typical party was similar to your guys in that it was Heisme. I'm not Heisme. I'm sorry. Hulkenberg, Stroll, and then I would switch out Juna or Yufa depending. Like Yufa, and sometimes I would switch out. So I would always have Hulkenberg, and you have to have Will, obviously. And then I would usually have Stroll, and then I would usually have Juna. But sometimes Stroll would get switched out for Yufa, because you could put Yufa and Juna together in a really powerful way where you could just create arbitrary weaknesses on enemies and then exploit them immediately with the two of them. And you can do it with others too, but you can really do it in the greatest way with them. And they're like twin magic or whatever the fuck it's called in this game is cool too.
Yeah, I love that system in the game. I totally forgot about it.
Yeah, it's so, and I liked how there were set attacks that transcended. I mean, I thought the whole back end system of managing your skill set and your passives and all that was really cool. Like the mag economy is much more reasonable in the game than actually the gold economy or whatever the currency is. I was frustrated by how expensive things were. It makes the mag dealers really important. I earned probably half a million gold or whatever from the mag dealers over time, and still had super amounts of mag to use. So that was a little bit frustrating, but yeah. Anyway, as far as characters are concerned, I think it's strong overall for this. I can make a strong case for the party I use just because of the way they interact with each other. I rarely used Basilio, and I liked Heisme. He was really like his whole ninja thing, like his whole thief arc is useful in some ways. But I didn't use him very often, to be perfectly honest with you. Once I'm very obsessive with this stuff, and I was in Persona 4 as well, in leveling people up evenly. Just because you don't know who's going to, like, if someone's going to get taken away from you or you're going to be stuck with some shitty party or whatever. So I'm always nervous about that. And so I managed that, but eventually you do your social skills enough where everyone doesn't earn less experience when they're not in battle, and then it becomes irrelevant. And then you really, in my experience, just I stuck to the party I was using after that, because it's like, well, there's no downside to doing this. Plus, like, managing equipment in such an expensive economy for fewer characters is pretty vital, I think. So there's that. What did you guys think of the social stats system in this and the way it was represented? So obviously each game has its own kind of, each of their Persona style games has its own kind of thing. Here it's courage, wisdom, tolerance, eloquence, and imagination split into this crown. I loved, again, the UI is really beautiful.
Crown.
Yeah, the crown is really cool.
It looked good.
Yeah.
Maxing that out was cool, and then the interplay between that and the options that are available to you is not new to this game, but it's a nice way to gate you from content without feeling like you couldn't do something yet. It's like, no, you chose not to focus on this, so you can't do it yet. It's not that you just can't. So I think it's a nice way to manage your time and force you into certain funnels. Yeah, so shout out to that. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to say about that.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that because, well, first of all, let me shout out another character that we haven't mentioned.
Sure.
Batlin, the crier.
Oh yeah, he's cool. Yeah, he ends up kind of being a great guy. Yeah.
Yeah. He ended up just being he's just a crier. The whole game, you're like, what the fuck is the deal with this guy? He's so interesting. Why the fuck is he everywhere? And it's just he's everywhere because he wants to be there. That's literally it. It's a really interesting, fascinating character. I saw somebody compare him to Jeff Keighley.
Yeah,
where it's like it was a tweet where it's like he's just some white guy that just went on stage and declared himself like the master of everything.
Right.
And everyone's like, oh yeah, sure, go for it. If you want to announce everything, go for it.
Did you get Maddie vibes from the way he looked?
A little bit.
Yeah.
He does look like fucking Mr. Maddie plays. Holy shit.
Yeah, a little bit.
But I love the whole eloquence tolerance system. I like it better than Persona 5. And I can say that because I just finished Persona 5. So much of Persona 5 is about like, do this baseball game and then you increase your guts, or go take a bath and you increase your blah blah blah. And Metaphor has some of that. You can just take a shit and your luck will go up, for example, on certain days. Or you can take baths, whatever like that. But a lot of it had to do with like, if you want your tolerance to go up, then you need to talk to those fucking freaks with the fucking buckets on their heads. And you need to understand the religion. Or if you want to increase your eloquence, then you better join debate club, motherfucker. Go up on stage and practice debating. So I really enjoyed that so much of the activities were directly at least written and involved with actually increasing maybe that stat that you're trying to increase, as opposed to, I'm studying and my knowledge. Well, yeah, you study it in Persona and your knowledge goes up. But I just feel like that overall it was just a lot stronger. Again, because the team is no longer constrained by high school tropes. You can just do anything, and that's what he did.
Yeah, that's well said.
And you can just read books and it's like, well, I can just get all the stats right here, I guess, whatever. But I do like the bungee jumping for courage. I was like, I did not expect bungee jumping in this game, but
yeah,
there it is. That was cool.
Yeah, and it gives you like some weird in-engine first-person view of things too. It's funny.
Yeah,
like it's like some jank thing they put together.
Adrenaline junkies, man, even there.
What's funny is that I never did the bungee jumping in this game. I didn't even realize that it goes in the
not
person.
once? You gotta try everything once.
Yeah. Well, the reason why is because I don't want to do bungee jumping in real life. So I was like, why the fuck would I do it in a video game?
Yeah, fuck me neither, man.
Face your anxieties,
Bungee jumping. I'm sure it's awesome, but like, I'm sure it's amazing, but it's just too risky.
Yeah, no thank you. No thanks.
Yeah, it's like, I'm good. I don't want to do that.
I'm okay. I don't need to do that.
It's the same thing with skydiving. I think it would be amazing, but it's like, I just don't feel like I need to do that. It's why take the non-zero risk that I'm just going to fall out of the sky and fucking die? It's not worth it.
Yeah, I've talked about this many times before, but I have personally covered way too many skydiving accidents, like almost up to 10. That is a lot of time that your parachute just doesn't fucking open and you just fall 20,000 feet and explode on the ground. And I have to write.
Yeah, like a terminal. You're like hitting at like terminal velocity. It's like, holy fuck.
Yeah, there's nothing left of you. So,
Colin, this might be a good point to mention.
Yeah.
Because this is a conversation we had on Sacred was about how people are misunderstanding the game or just seeing a tweet or something. It's like, oh, this game has a tolerance stat. What is this woke bullshit? And it's just so funny. And I think you said it best, where it's like, oh, this game encourages you to be open to other ways of life. That's bad. That's liberal.
Yeah, like, oh, you don't want to be tolerant? I mean, I don't like what are we even saying at this point? Like, you don't want to be. It doesn't. People just misinterpret like what it means. It doesn't mean that like you can't do things better or that your way is superior or anything like that. I think that like American culture is vastly superior, to many cultures around the world. It just means that like you tolerate that other people do things other ways. It doesn't mean that you accept it.
Right.
It's not acceptance. It's tolerance.
And I think through a modern lens.
Yeah, it doesn't mean taco trucks in every corner, which would be great.
Yeah, hell yeah, it would be.
Right. From a modern lens, when people hear the word tolerance, they're taking in the context of what that means now for a lot of people, where it's like, oh, tolerance is accepting everyone's belief, everyone's lifestyle as equal, and you must you must encourage it. You must be on board with everything everyone says all the time. Whereas this game is much more of a literal meaning of the word tolerance, where it's like, you know, the party is not tolerant to Luis's ideals, right?
No. They try to kill him several times, actually.
Yeah. They're not blindly tolerant to everything. And so it's just one of those silly things where it's like, man, people just look into things for a second and understand what tolerance actually means for a split second. Think.
Well, we tolerate things all day. I mean, that's just that's like one of the most human qualities is tolerance. Just again, I think people think it's like, oh, you tolerate things to a certain degree. Like in all things. It doesn't mean you accept everything or roll over or cede ground. I just don't understand. I don't know, man. We've said this before recently because we've been talking about it more. But the culture is just deeply broken. Like from a perspective of just being able to analyze anything and be excited about anything and see anything for what it is or have differences of opinions or whatever. It's broken. And like the best we can do now is to like do it better here. But I don't think we're going to have any influence on the wider world anymore. Like, cause like when that's just reinforced every day for me as things seem to decay more and more. And people just see words like that or notions like that and they just balk at it. It's very strange. Whatever we talk, is there anything we haven't touched on?
I have a question for you guys. What do you guys think about this game's plot twist? Usually in Persona games, there's a big moment that's a big revelation that kind of changes the course of things. I think that this game's big one is that you are the prince. You have been the prince the whole time. And I could see, you know, I listed my grievances earlier, and I've seen some people complain about the way this happens online, but this is actually one that I think in terms of the overarching themes is actually really cool, that the prince himself like is able to manifest this archetypal version of himself and eventually is able to become that, which I think was kind of neat. But
man.
Brad, what do you think?
I thought of Kingdom Hearts immediately when this happened. I was like, this is some Kingdom Hearts bullshit right now in this game.
That's his
that's his fucking nobody right there.
Nobody, yeah.
His nobody. Yeah.
Yeah.
The prince wakes up and says, "You're nobody."
Yeah. You got to merge with himself to get everything back. Yeah.
Colin and I don't give a fuck.
Tuning out.
You will know.
I'll get there, guys. I'm getting to Kingdom Hearts sooner or later. I finished Persona 5, so I'll get to Kingdom Hearts.
I saw there was something about if we hit a certain amount of patrons, Colin will play Kingdom Hearts.
Was that you put in like a ridiculous 20,000 people.
We need a whale to come in.
I think it was double. Whatever
or double,
right?
so
was it 20,000
like 26,000 or something? I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe
it's never going to happen. I mean, that's totally fine. We've also realized in the past few weeks, and I've been dealing with Patreon, and Dustin's been on a lot of these emails, and that we've realized that like the number of patrons that is being shown publicly, like our paying patrons, is not accurate. Like it's in that pocket, but it's like never been as high as it says it's been, and it's not as low as it says it is right now. It's very weird. We have no idea what's going on. It's driving me fucking insane. So yeah, so I'll be honest if we reach that number, because who knows if the number being shown is actually going to be accurate if and when that happens. But I never thought we would reach 5,000 or 10,000. So I don't know.
Make it happen.
Maybe it can happen. You know, I don't know. I think we're in an increasingly illiterate age where I think long form content like this is going to be big in pockets, and obviously you have your Rogans and all of that, but I think we're like the anti-TikTok video or something. And I mean to insult people that like that stuff. It's just, I think that's where things are going, obviously. And so I think we have a ceiling personally. Yeah. But who knows?
Makes sense. But Gene, what did you think of the twist?
So I thought it was super easy to predict, you know, from day one. I was like, this has to be the prince, right? They got the same face shape already. They're so coy about their history and their past. Of course, it's got to be the prince. So when it happened, I wasn't surprised. But I'm like you, Dustin. That's how I took it. I thought it was very core to the story that you were trying to imagine yourself into another world, and that's what the prince did, and that's the fantasy of it. To be able to, like for example, the prince is essentially a disabled kid in this game, right? So the act of playing a video game itself already is being able to project yourself into a fantasy world. So the game obviously is being meta in that. And when the game starts, Thomas More is talking to you, the player. What is your name? Versus what is the character's name. So, the game is trying to recreate that sense of like, hey, you are projecting Will or whatever you name Will metaphor, your character Gene into this world, and you're going on this adventure with all of these friends. And it became like a kind of like a journey of literal self-discovery, So I didn't mind it. For me, the most exciting part of the game was the part that you hated, which was Luis dying. Not so much the reasons why Luis came back to life. I did think the Zorba thing was kind of cheesy and corny and very, very convenient. But everything about the assassination plot I thought was so exciting. Like the way it was framed, the way it was shot, Will just holding the spear and like breathing heavily and just be like, fuck, is he really going to do it? Are they actually going to do it? And he throws the spear and you see the spear puncture Luis and you're like, oh shit, we actually fucking did it. And like everything about the confusion, I just let myself like just be overwhelmed with the confusion and the chaos of that moment. So for me, that was a big kind of plot twist of metaphor versus the prince kind of happening, because there were so many different things happening. So that's why I enjoyed all the chaos of what was going on during the Saints Day assassination scene, that I was able to gloss over Zorba, even though when I saw Zorba, I was like, oh, come the fuck on.
Right.
Well, I totally get not being over Zorba, and I do think Zorba is probably the weakest part of the entire plot in general.
I think the assassination part overall is really good.
Yeah.
The plan is insane, but I feel like it's an insane. The stakes are insane, so it calls for an insane plan. And I even like that you hit him, but then he like shows up on the roof and he's like, fight me, motherfucker. Like, and that showdown is really cool. And so it's like this, like kind of on off. It's like, oh, we got him. Oh no, we didn't. We got to fight him and really cool. Take him out. That's cool.
And then he says like, attack me at any number. And you're just like, yeah.
So all of that led up. I'm like, this is sick. And then there's the moment where he kind of lets his guard down, and that's when he gets actually stabbed. And then I'm like, come on. When he comes back, because it's like there was so much build up to this moment where it's like, are you going to do it? Or are you going to not? And then you achieve the goal and it's like, no, you didn't. Necromancer's here. So I think that's part of it's just the disappointment with the build up of how good that part is.
Yeah. The build up was so good that you probably expected a better plan other than my Necromancer revived me,
Right.
For
sure. Also
totally
revived him, was also revived.
Somehow.
Self-revive, Luis revive, I don't know.
Hey, Dustin, they can fix it in the Royal Edition. Get a little extra few scenes for that.
Yeah. Oh, that's the thing too. In Metaphor Royal Edition or whatever, it feels like that they completely removed the Mage Academy as a dungeon.
Yeah, that seems like it definitely. Yeah,
it was very quick. Part of the game's very quick.
You're standing outside the Mage Academy, and you're just like,
That's where the boss fight happens, where the game becomes really hard. I think. Where the game spikes. Yeah, you're right. I did read some people saying that, and it does seem like it just like they cut a part of the game out, which is so funny when you think about a game that was in development for so long. It's like, you're cutting things out of a game that like you should have had a better structure after all these years. But maybe. Do you guys think that there'll be a Royal edition of this? I mean, it seems to be their style.
Oh yeah.
Will you replay it? I will tell you right now, I'm not playing this game again.
It's gonna be tough. I mean, Brad hasn't even played Persona 5 Royal, right?
I played 20 hours of it. I didn't finish it.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's gonna be. I'll have to decide when it get there.
I mean, maybe in like 10 years or something, I'd play it again or something. I'm not gonna replay it anytime soon though.
It's shorter than Persona 5, so maybe.
Royal.
Think about it.
Royal came out during the pandemic, and that was actually one of the last games I got early from my old site. So it hit at the perfect time. It's like, what else am I gonna do? I think I was editing 2 or 3 shows a week for Last Stand, and Holly also wasn't at work, so it was like, well, what else am I going to do? Well, I'm wondering in a different context where now we're a lot more busy.
But you beat Persona 5 regular?
Yeah.
Okay. So you did 5 on Royal. Okay, yeah. So so I've never had the experience. Like I've never beaten Persona 4 Golden, for example. I just beat Vanilla. So I've never done
the PS2 version.
I just played it on PS2. That's it. Loved it on PS2. But I've never done the Mega 10 redo. So maybe Metaphor will be the first one. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, it'll be probably like 3 or 4 years till it's out. Yeah. I'll definitely buy it.
It depends on what they add. If they just add the Mage Academy, then I probably won't play it. But if they add just like a shit ton of other shit, or like I don't know.
Jose.
It really
You can add Jose into the game.
Yeah. If there's a whole Jose character and everything,
Yeah.
I'm curious what you guys think about so I guess these things are kind of interrelated in my mind, although not really, maybe perhaps, but the game suggests that this is a part of the world, but not the whole world, right? I mean, and which is unusual for not games like this, perhaps, but JRPGs generally. It's like you have kind of dominion over the planet at some point, especially with your airship and your ship and your rover and all of these different things that they give you in these kinds of different games. So I kind of take that in and couple it with like, is there going to be another one of these? Is there a way to continue it with either the same characters or to do something so like, a true sequel, or to do a different Metaphor : whatever. The game sold 3 million copies or something like that. So I think that's a pretty big hit.
And
what do you have to say about this, Gene?
Yeah, they're probably, I'll just keep it real short, but they're probably going to go the Final Fantasy approach, where it's an anthology and there are different kingdoms of Metaphor. We'll see.
Oh, it's 1 million in one day. There's nothing since then. I'm sure it's several million.
1 million one day is huge.
I mean, that's amazing.
Massive. That's crazy.
For them, big time. Well, it's good for anybody, but for them especially, really good.
Yeah.
I could see there being spin-offs, much like Persona 5, where we don't have a true sequel to Persona 5, but we have side stories that take place after. I'm sure that Koei Tecmo salivating at the thought of a Metaphor Dynasty Warriors.
Omega Force game, yeah.
Omega Force, yeah. I'm sure that's in the cards.
Metaphor Dancing all Night,
Dude, Dancing in the Sanctum, whatever. How these guys getting down.
A Fabian dance. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to go crazy.
They'll milk it. Honestly, I think that's an annoying thing about Persona. While those side games are good for Persona 5, I'm done with that crew. I don't need anything else from them. And so maybe that'll be the case with this game as well, where we get 3 or 4 spin-off games. But I would imagine, like what Gene says, if there is a sequel, it'll be all new characters in a different type of either a different location, different era, something like that. But
might be in a different country. That could be cool.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to kind of take place even maybe at the same time or in the shadow of it, or you come in and discover, and like the events of the game maybe take place during the events in the same space, or if you want to do something like asset flippy. I don't know what their plan really is, but I was curious what you guys thought of that, because I think that there's potential there. It's not like it doesn't seem so final like many other role-playing games do, I guess is what I'm saying. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys is how you feel about its accolades that it's kind of earned, I think, industry-wide, not only with the Game Awards, but it just seems like a very well-received game. Low 90s on Metacritic. RPG of the Year at the Game Awards.
Best narrative. I find that incredible in a year where Final Fantasy VII Rebirth comes out. Both from narrative and just role playing generally, but I'm clearly in the minority on this. I'm curious what you guys think of this, because I was so blown away by Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that it was going to be really tough sledding to come anywhere near that, and I don't think this game does. So I'm curious what you, and I don't want to. It's a really wonderful game. I mean, truly, but it's not. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a rare masterpiece of a game, I think, in a lot of ways. So what do you think, Gene? I think this blows away Rebirth in terms of story. In terms of production, obviously not. In terms of scale, obviously not. And even in terms of gameplay, I really still value the gameplay systems that Rebirth brought. It was really just the ending of Rebirth that kind of brought it down a few notches for me, in that there's a clarity in voice, in metaphor, in the writing that Rebirth doesn't necessarily have, and that obviously has a lot to do with the fact that it is a middle child in the story, So I think some of the negatives that I might have in comparison to Metaphor is just baked into what Rebirth is in general, being a remake also as well, as opposed and as well as being an elaboration or a clarification of the original game or even remake or whatever. So that's where I am at. That's where I land on this. I think I would have been happy if it won Game of the Year. Although I'm very happy that Astrobot won, honestly too. And I'm pretty happy with Metaphor being considered best narrative of the year. Even though I actually disagree with that. I think Mouthwashing now is the best narrative of the year too.
Might have come out too late to.
Yeah, it came out way too late, and like 5 people played it. So including me and Chris Reagan, and that's it.
Yeah, Chris loves it.
Yeah, me
and Dustin liked it. I think he was the first one to play it,
actually.
Too.
Yeah, that's right. So, but yeah, I think the accolades are well deserved. I was wondering whether it's one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. I'm kind of stepping back away from that now, even in terms of like comparing it to Dragon Quest XI, which I really really loved, and I think they're kind of similar, but honestly, I think I still do like Dragon Quest XI a little bit more. Just in terms of what it offers as a game too, and just like even though it's less ambitious in its themes and its story, it's just a much cleaner.
It's very traditional story. Still.
Very traditional, yeah.
That game does end 3 different times, which is so funny. It's like, oh my god.
The game does have several different endings, including one really really interesting ending that you think it just has several different endings for sure. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think it's well deserved for sure.
Brad, where are you on this? I know you and I are Final Fantasy VII Rebirth lovers.
Yeah, I still like Rebirth more than this game, and I mean I have a fond attachment to 7 anyways. So, and Rebirth went above and beyond for me in so many ways. So I was very happy with it. I do think this game is great, though. I really enjoyed it. I had an awesome time playing it. I think it's an excellent video game. For the RPG of the Year award, I think this game came out at a very good time for those nominees, because they probably took nominees, I'm going to say, in early November or like late October. This game came out in October, so people were very high on it at the time, as that what always happens with games. So I think it came out at a perfect time to get everyone on it. And of course, it was multi-platform, so everyone had easier access to it, so that definitely helped it. But yeah, I personally like Rebirth more than this game. The narrative things, like, I don't know, sure, like whatever. I could see Metaphor. I like the narrative Metaphor. I just think Metaphor had some problems like Dustin brought up and stuff like that. But don't worry, we'll get it fixed in the Utopia edition.
Yeah, that'll probably be what it is, Utopia edition.
Yeah, so they'll get all that. But yeah, I still think it's an awesome game. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you like turn-based RPGs, because Rebirth's not, but it's a high-quality video game that I recommend. I wish it seemed higher budget, though. I really wish they'd move away from like the PS2 feeling towns with like 5 zones in all of them. Let me explore that town freely without loading all the time. But yeah,
there's a lot of like areas that you just visit as a JPEG,
Yeah,
and they're beautiful, and
they look awesome.
They're beautiful concept art, and it's like, man, like they obviously have a lot planned for this world. So like the sequel could even take place in the same Euchronia land.
Yeah, that would be cool. That's what I was saying. It's like, yeah, you could get away with that a little bit, I think. Yeah. Which would be pretty interesting. Yeah, it did seem limited in some sense. I do like more explorable towns. I know a lot of people had technical issues with the game as far as frame rates are concerned. I've said many times that because it's not an action game per se, I'd never really noticed any problems with that. That was bothering me. What was bothering me were the load times. And again, they're not long. It's just, why are we loading so much? Like, what is going? This is nothing. This is a PS3 game, basically. It's like, what are we doing? Yeah. So yeah, it did feel a little unfun from that perspective, but whatever. A small quibble. Dustin, thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like the accolades overall are deserved. I personally probably would score it a little lower if I was reviewing this game, because of some of the problems I laid out earlier. I think that overall, though, the overall themes kind of shine through the plot related issues. Probably controversial take here, but while I think this game is really great and I appreciate it for being a new spin on the Persona format, and I think that overall probably this is the strongest combat that this team has made, I'm so much of a story and overall picture of a game that I think I would rank this below Persona 3, 4, and 5 for me. That and a lot of that's personal taste. A lot of it's probably me being a Persona fanboy to some degree, but I just think through and through, I prefer the story and the characters and even like the music and some other the finer things of Persona games to this. And a lot of the problems still do exist, like plot related problems exist in those games. I don't think it's as bad in those games. Maybe it's been a long time since I've played Persona 4 Golden, and even Persona 5. It's been let's see, Royal came out in 2020, so it's been close to
4 years,
3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So maybe on re-reflection I would feel different, but yeah, I think it deserves the praise, and I think that despite its problems, the winning the best narrative because of its characters, because of its messages, the way that it ties in stuff from our real world like Utopia and more and stuff like that. I think it's a well-deserved win.
Right on. Yeah. A great game. I recommend it if you have time. I mean, you need to have lots and lots of time, but if you do, I think it's time well spent. It's been such a good year for role-playing games, I think. And just meteor games. It's starting to annoy me more and more when people are like, this year, I can't wait for this year to be over. This year sucked. I was like, this year is fucking great, dude. Like, I played a ton of really awesome games this year, including a game, like I said, with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that I think is like a generational level game. Not necessarily the best of the generation, but you would put it in that conversation, I think. So yeah, it seems something like Metaphor coming in pretty late, maybe some recency bias, but nonetheless, I mean, this is a very highly anticipated game from a huge publisher of increasingly beloved in the West role-playing games, from the guy that kind of cut off from Persona. I think that's exciting. Mm-hmm. So I'm very curious to see what the future holds. Obviously, we'll be with Persona 6 long before we are with anything having to do with the series again, I think in a meaningful sequel-like way. But yeah, the Utopia edition, I mean, that's got to be what it is. I think you named it.
Yeah, for me, I'm glad. Dustin's a Persona fanboy, and I love Persona, and I just play Persona 5. And I need to stress, I don't know whether I like Persona 5 more than Metaphor. I think Persona 5 is incredible game. But I was so relieved that Metaphor was not Persona, and I think that fed into my willingness to like Metaphor just a lot more, because I was just so fucking done with high school kids. That's all. That's why I like a Dragon so much, because Like a Dragon is basically a Persona game with 40 or 50-year-old homeless people. I think that's amazing.
This was a great conversation. I mean, I'm glad I spent time with this game. I'm glad for it to be over though, because I just need to move on to other things. Mm-hmm. It's one of those games that occupies so much time and so much space. And it's somewhat complicated. It would be hard to jump around from game to game, I think, and kind of keep this game in the top of mind. So
I was playing Persona 5 the last few weeks, and it's exactly the same thing, man. I really felt like it was like a lifestyle, like a job for me playing Persona 5. And I couldn't play Indiana Jones because of it, because it's like I have to keep locked into the Persona style, and that's what Metaphor is too. It just kind of these games kind of take over your life when you play them.
Enormous amount of respect to all the writing that's in the game too. So much, a lot of translating and localizing done as well. By the way, I love the narrator's voice, very tranquil, and really, really enjoyed his soliloquies about all the different places that you would visit and all the rest. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, just really immersive. Well done. Highly recommended. Check it out. It's on everything. Is it on Game Pass? I thought it was on Game Pass, or maybe they just released it on Xbox.
No.
Yes,
they did the marketing. I think.
Yes.
With Xbox.
Cool. So worked out pretty well, I think.
All the marketing on Xbox. And Cog brings up a good point. It's like everyone's like, well, why all the audiences on PlayStation? Well, of course it is. You need to get those Xbox idiots to buy it. So you should market it on Xbox, because everyone at Xbox doesn't realize that they have a lot of good games there, and they should just buy that.
I agree. I think it made perfect sense for Microsoft to try to get that, and for Sega to try to get these games out in a major way over there, since it was a big deal. Persona wasn't on PlayStation, or it wasn't on Xbox at all. So I think it's cool that they're spreading the field there. Again, I've said it over and over again. If I do own a developer, but I mean, if I owned a real publisher or developer of games, it's like, I want my games everywhere, dude. That's just like a no brainer. and we follow the same path. So I don't blame anyone. If one of these places wants exclusives, you got to pay. Yeah, it's not the same anymore. That I think the last holdout that I'm curious about is Neon Falcom with and I think they might have broken with the East games, right? But still not with Trails, where those games are still just on PlayStation and Switch and PC.
I think they're on not Xbox. Yeah.
So, but no, and I think no plans for Xbox releases for that. So it's like strange. It's like, no, if I were you guys, I'd be like, what are you doing? Like,
Phil Spencer's Japanese isn't good enough.
Yeah, it's not sufficient. He didn't bow deeply enough.
Well, watashi no filu desu, you know.
Yeah,
Phil-kun.
I tried to bow as deeply as possible when I was there, just to show my deep and two hands on the
filu desu.
Yeah, the card
on the card and all the rest. Yeah, didn't want to offend anyone. All right, boys, that was fun. Appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me about this. I hope people enjoy the conversation just in time for Christmas, and I hope everyone out there has a good Christmas, a good New Year. Good Hanukkah, whatever it is you celebrate. If you're a pagan, some sort of weird solstice celebration or something. That's wonderful.
Some tree stuff, some druid things.
That's right.
Druid.
Let's go around the horn and say goodbye to everyone. Dustin, goodbye to you. Be well.
Goodbye. This was a great conversation. Glad that we could discuss it in depth. And let's see, it's 4:00 almost. Got a good chunk of the day left, so hopefully I can catch up on some of the work that I ignored to be on this spoiler cast. But it was worth it because I knew I needed to talk to you guys. So thank you.
Cool. Well done. Brad, goodbye to you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I've talked to Gina about this game for a long time, so it was nice to hear Dustin and Colin's thoughts, getting them out there. I know Dustin's sending me things every now and then, his thoughts, but getting the full-blown thoughts was very good. Oh, yeah, and it's lunchtime, baby.
Yeah.
It's burrito time
for you.
Oh,
yeah.
Burrito. Nice.
I'm stoked.
Nice.
I'm stoked.
Have fun. Enjoy. Gene, goodbye to you, my friend. Be well. Have you seen any of the drones in your area?
The drones?
Yeah.
Are they supposed to be flying? Is that what's going on right now?
Yeah, they're like, apparently, I was listening to Ryan Graves on Rogan yesterday where they're saying like there's like maybe 800 just unaccounted for UAP style drones flying around the mid-Atlantic.
Oh, that's wild.
They're sniffing for the nuke, dude.
Yeah, that's what some people are saying. He's saying that's not true because he knows people in that field and they're not doing any of that stuff. So it's like, well, who would be doing it then?
I honestly have so much anxiety over getting nuked.
Well, I would if I lived in
Living in
Washington,
DC?
D.C. Yeah.
Yeah. I live in Washington, D.C. And every time I hear like a loud bang, I'm like, well, there it is right there. I'm going to grab my cat and hold on tight.
Bright flash.
You're going to make a permanent shadow on your wall.
Yeah. I mean, what a way to go out, It'd be pretty quick, I think, hopefully. So,
Yeah, it'd be vaporized in an instant.
Yeah, in some way you're blessed living in Washington because you won't have to deal with the both literal and figurative fallout. You'll just be gone. And then we'll have some sort of Jericho-like situation on our hands that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I'd run to the White House though, for sure. Just get me to ground zero,
Yeah, sure. Or it could be like there was a Call of Duty game. There's probably multiple Call of Duty games, but I remember a Call of Duty game where you fight around the White House and then in the White House. Like it's like a war situation. People have bombed it and it's all fucking cool. Maybe it'll be like
Modern
that.
Modern Warfare 2.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah. So be safe, be well. Here in Virginia, in Southern Virginia, the jet stream goes in that direction. So we won't even, I don't think, get any of the fallout. So I'm happy as a pig in shit right now down here. We're good.
I know. I need to move down there. Yeah. Just be proximal, but not like in the blast zone of Biden, or Trump even.
Right.
Within the next 4 years. But check out my interview on Metaphor. On that note, go check out my interview and review on Metaphor ReFantazio. A lot of you out there subscribe to the Washington Post just to read it.
Nice.
And I want to take the time to thank everyone who did that. It got me a lot of praise and got me a raise actually at work.
Awesome.
Which is nice.
Congrats.
And I want to recognize, I think this is probably the last podcast I'm doing with LSM for this year, obviously. But thank you, Colin, for giving me your audience. I know a lot of my subscribers are listeners out there, and I know that I was personally introduced to a lot of you through Colin and through LSM, and it's nice to meet so many of you. And thanks so much for listening.
Yeah,
and thank you, Colin, for letting me be on your network.
No, you're very welcome. I mean, I think everyone's doing an awesome job. I'm really thrilled with where we are right now. I think we're doing great. I think we have to refocus on certain things that have nothing to do with any of the performance of any of the people there. Like, it's like, I'm the leader. I have to make decisions. And the people that are like on the ship are like the fucking least of the problems that I have to deal with. Like everyone's doing an awesome job taking advantage of the situation, which is exactly what I'd want them to do, and making it their own. And you guys have earned your way here. Like no one would be part of this if you weren't well received. I'd shoot you into the sun, you know? So, but that's, I think I have a pretty good eye for that. You know, even the people that people take umbrage with, like more people take umbrage with, like Jaffe. I'm like, no, he's very welcome here. You know, I had a little bit. I'll just be honest with you. Like I got a sad DM actually from I don't know if you saw it, Dustin, of a guy saying like on Patreon saying like Jaffe was saying recently that he hasn't heard from you guys recently, and he was worried that because of things that are going on with him, he's like not welcome anymore. And I messaged him and I'm like, I don't know why you would think this. Like I just sent you a bonus and like a handwritten letter, and he's like, oh, I haven't checked my mail in like a week.
What do you say to that?
He was just like, he's like, I'm sorry, I would have had to leave the house or something. I'm like, yeah, no, it's good. I just don't want you. It hurts me.
I've been texting you.
It hurts me to think that he thinks that, you know, it's like, I don't think that. If people want to leave because they don't like you, it's like, we're willing, you know, as long as you're not like going off and going crazy, I want people to be themselves. Everyone's doing a great job. So thank you guys for your hard work. I appreciate you guys. Couldn't do without you. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. Merry Christmas. Be well. The content will continue to flow, by the way. We've been recording it for weeks, but we will be back to record more live-ish content, I guess more quick to publish content in January. I need a little bit of a break, though. I'm shot. So,
yep, me too. I'm done.
All right, my boys. Thanks again. Thank you all out there. Be well. Goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.